Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. I think I just let you in on a little bit on the magic, so to speak. It's great to be here with you again. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your existential Mr. Rogers, and of course, lest we forget, the sanctimoniously notorious Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you here from the Robservatory, Robcasting on a Sunday afternoon. And this is, of course, Robservations, a show about something, episode number 323. By God, it's great to have you all here, and I want to welcome all of the new subscribers, of which there are many. I hope you enjoy this. What I think is the greatest community on the interwebs, and certainly the most inviting. And I think you'll find that out if you hang out in the chat room. Well, you know, everyone, I struggle sometimes to think about what I'm gonna do today. Like, what is going to be the topic of today's conversation? What is it that I want to discuss? And I know we got Picard. We got Picard starting on Thursday. We also have the short film that I edited, Lucas Kendall's short film that he wrote and directed that I edited. Skyfighter is dropping on the Dust Network also on Thursday. I will also be heading over to New York City on Thursday, of course, to compete in the Schmodown, because Andrew Guy apparently wants to beat up on a manager. I mean, my former teammate, unbelievable, that guy. Has he no shame? But anyway, I agreed to it. Anything to promote my team, the Burning Droogs, right? We're also having a screening of Tango Shalom. So if anyone is in the New York area, I've got a few seats if you are interested in seeing Tango Shalom. And I was cutting the trailer for Tango Shalom today. So that's kind of fun. Going to be a fun time. Is going to be had by all. But with Oscar season in full swing, we're waiting. Obviously, the nominations have come out. And everybody's awaiting to see who will take the Oscar Gold home. And there is, obviously, we've got the Producers Guild was giving out their awards last night. You've got the DGA, the WGA, SAG, the Writers Guild. All the different guilds around Hollywood are giving out awards to the very deserving, very worthy films this year. It looks like 1917, having won the Golden Globe, has pulled out. He is now probably the front runner to take Best Picture. I'm hoping to go see that this evening. We shall see. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. I have a lot of work to do, especially in the next upcoming week. But it got me thinking. It got me thinking about, what does Hollywood love? And, you know, as I'm wont to do, one of the great things, the technological advances, these search engines. Gosh, I mean, who would have thunk that so much information is right at your fingertips? And as you just, you know, the speed of thought, I'm like, do I go to the AFI 100 list? Does that really signify what it is that Hollywood loves? You know, I don't know. So I just started doing a search, and interestingly enough, a list came up from 2014, Hollywood's favorite movies. And I'm like, well, that's kind of compelling. I find that very interesting. So I figured, why not share that? And now, what's interesting about that, we'll take a look. Hollywood's 100 favorite films. And of course, what better way to judge the movies of all time than the people who make them? Studio chiefs, Oscar winners, and TV royalty were all surveyed as the Hollywood Reporter publishes its first definitive entertainment industry ranking of cinema's most superlative. And, you know, I started looking through this, and I'm like, this is a pretty good list. I don't necessarily agree with all of the rankings in terms of where they fall. Some are a lot higher than I think they should be. Some are much lower than I think they should be, including, let's take a gander at what we've got here. Number 1 is The Seven Samurai. The Seven Samurai, I mean, if you haven't seen Seven Samurai, all of Kurosawa's samurai movies, his early work, Seven Samurai, and of course The Hidden Fortress. If you're a Star Wars fan and you have not seen Kurosawa's samurai movies, you are missing out. You are missing out on the very basis of what Lucas was inspired by. Lucas and Francis Coppola famously went on and they brought some of Kurosawa's movies here, things like Kagemusha and Ron. Amazing. And it, it talks about the the domestic lifetime gross, $367,500. Well, don't let that dissuade you from whether or not you should see this movie. And of course, Criterion has put out sort of what I would think are definitive editions out on almost every format, and Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray. Check those out. And if you haven't seen Seven Samurai, and I figured, okay, but Seven Samurai I think should be a lot higher on that list than number 100. Which, okay, I'll get it. I'll give you that. I like the quote, "What's the use of worrying about your beard when your head's about to be taken?" Wise words, I think. And then we go down to Bonnie and Clyde, directed, of course, by the great Arthur Penn, which is amazing. If you haven't seen Bonnie and Clyde, one of the great crime films ever made, of course, based on the real Bonnie and Clyde. This here's Miss Bonnie Parker. I'm Clyde Barrow. We rob banks. Of course, Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. And that's it, 99? I mean, I would have thought this movie would have been much higher. I mean, you go down Reservoir Dogs at 98, Tarantino's first movie. Airplane at 97. Love to see Airplane on this list, which is so great. I mean, you look at the domestic lifetime gross adjusted for inflation, $246 million. That's a lot. Now, if you guys, I know that Airplane's from 1980, but still, the Zaz team, Zucker, Abrams, Zucker, they came on the scene with this movie. I mean, I can't tell you what it was like. I saw this movie the same year as The Empire Strikes Back came out, and I can't tell you how this movie sort of changed comedy. Of course, it led to things like Top Secret and the Naked Gun movies and all of that, and what a phenomenal film this is. So already I started off looking at this list going, all right, we're 97, Airplane, that's good. Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. Wow, Guillermo del Toro's masterpiece. Great stuff, right? Dr. Zhivago, classic from 65 from our man David Lean, who directed also Lawrence of Arabia. Not bad. The Deer Hunter. I don't know why they don't have a color picture here, but Michael Cimino's Best Picture winning harrowing tale of the Vietnam War and the men who left from small communities all over the United States to go fight. Another tour de force performance. Christopher Walken, amazing, really exploded across our cinema screens with this. Robert De Niro again. De Niro been bringing home world-class performances since the 70s. This movie was recently released by Canal Plus, our Studio Canal, in a definitive 4-disc special edition with the 4K, the Blu-ray, and the soundtrack and special features. Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters at 93. Would have thought this would be a little higher than it is, but again, just for inflation, almost $400 million back in 77. That was, it was a big hit. And when I was a kid, when Close Encounters basically opened 6 months after Star Wars, and even in Seattle on 6th Avenue, the UA-150, my beloved UA-150, was on one side of 6th Avenue, and at the corner of 6th and Blanchard. And if you went across the street was the King Cinema, also playing Close Encounters. And there were rival, even Star Wars, though, had been playing for 6 months. When Close Encounters opened, there were rival lines down the street. And it was just, I probably saw Close Encounters. Like, there was a time, in 77, I'm 10. I was trying to be contrarian after I'd seen Star Wars, like, 15 times in the theater. When Close Encounters came out, I'm like, Close Encounters is by far the better science fiction movie. I could be even as a 10-year-old a film snob, a pretentious asshole, and I certainly was when Close Encounters came out. But, nice to see it on this list. Up, first animated at 92. I would have thought maybe Up would have ranked higher, but there's so many great movies in the world. Interesting to see. So just, going through these, and again, this is 2014. 6 years ago, things can change. Rocky at 91. Another Best Picture winner at 91. Pretty interesting. I love this quote. Yo, Adrian, it's me, Rocky. Like, who doesn't remember that? Memento, pretty high on the list. Christopher Nolan's, of course, breakthrough movie after he'd done his film Following. He had done Memento, and that got him Insomnia at Warner Brothers. So that pretty interesting. That Memento's number 90. Braveheart, Again, another Best Picture winner, directed by an actor, of course, Mel Gibson. And again, every man dies, not every man really lives. Who doesn't remember that quote? What a great quote from that film. Slumdog Millionaire, another Best Picture winner at 88. 88. I would have thought that would have been higher, if only because whenever I think of Slumdog Millionaire, I want to dance and go jai ho, do that whole thing. But I'll spare you, even though I just did it. I'm sorry. Return of the King, only at 87. My God, only at 87. Of course, the movie that swept the Academy Awards. Amazing and unbelievable film. Beauty and the Beast, second animated title. But so we just go through this list. And 7, happy to see that on that list. 95, 7. Inception, another Christopher Nolan movie. Die Hard at 83. Nice to see Die Hard on the list. Pretty cool. Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, higher than Return of the King. And I actually kind of agree with that. I think that Return of the King, we knew what we were going to get, but with Fellowship of the Ring, it was a mystery. We didn't know exactly what we were going to get with that. And what I thought was really interesting about, I was working for Curdy Pellerin, the special features company that was producing the special features for the extended versions of Lord of the Rings. And we had got the job, but we hadn't seen anything. The movie hadn't opened yet. And our team we had to go to one evening we went to New Line Cinema, and they had this 20-minute reel that had been shown at the Cannes Film Festival. And we were like, well, we hope it's good. And my boss, Michael Pellerin, was a Tolkien fanatic. The way I am about Star Trek, he was about Tolkien. It was like, is it going to be good? And in this 20-minute reel, they showed the establishing shots of the Shire, but they showed the extended Mines of Moria scene all the way down to the Balrog, Gandalf's confrontation with the Balrog until fly, you fools, and he falls. And I remember, first of all, after I saw, we were all stunned. I mean, it's hard to remember now because it's 2001, but that sequence, that Mines of Moria sequence, was stunning. And there'd really never been anything like that, certainly in a fantasy film. The combination of the visual effects and just the suspense. I mean, it was breathless. And when they're going down the steps and all that, it was something no one had ever seen that before. And I always talk about how when Star Wars came out and when Alien came out, that no one had ever seen anything like that. And I think Lord of the Rings, we tend to forget that as far as fantasy films go, it was pretty spectacular. I mean, really, really, it was stunning. And so, but I would have thought it would have been higher up on this list. Amadeus, a movie I saw when I was in high school. I wrote a review of Amadeus for my high school newspaper. Again, another Best Picture winner. Love this movie. If you haven't seen Amadeus, of course, it's obviously about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And it is such a wildly entertaining movie. Tom Hulce, who played Pinto in Animal House, of course, is in this movie and delivers a great performance. And F. Murray Abraham as Salieri. What's not to love about this film? On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando. What's not to love about that? 1954. Not a lot of classics on this list, at least not enough. There's a few, but not enough. But as far as these things go, On the Waterfront, I mean, come on. You got to love that. Eve Marie Saint. Ooh. Wall-E, another Pixar movie. What's not to love about Pixar? What's not to love about this movie? And not only is this a great animated film, it is a great science fiction movie. Absolutely a great science fiction movie that I've always really dug. 12 Angry Men, Sidney Lumet, Henry Fonda. If you haven't seen 12 Angry Men, of course Criterion put it out. What a great film. It shows you how I've always said that even to make great Star Trek, you can have, if you go back and you look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine's penultimate episode, Duet, or Star Trek The Next Generation's The Measure of a Man, movies that are basically set, or episodes that are set in one room. This movie is basically set in one room, and it shows that if you have a compelling story, you can make a film that is set in one room just as compelling, if not more so. The human drama, not more so than, say, even something as epic as Lawrence of Arabia or even Apocalypse Now. What a great movie if you haven't seen 12 Angry men. Ghostbusters. Surprised to see Ghostbusters on this list. I don't know if Ghostbusters is on the AFI Top 100 list, but this list was compiled by people that are working in the industry. These are industry people that they polled back in 2014 when they did this list. And I thought, Ghostbusters pretty good. I don't know if it necessarily belongs on the 100 right, this list is the 100 favorite movies of all time, maybe not necessarily best. And by that stretch, I'm like, okay, I'll buy into this. Brokeback Mountain, obviously a transcendent movie. Ang Lee directing it. Ang Lee, one of our most exciting directors. Of course, he had Gemini Man come out last year, but Ang Lee did everything from The Ice Storm, which I love. If you haven't seen The Ice Storm, it's a movie set in the 70s. It deals with the morals and the family drama of the time. But I've often, in my own mind, I often saw The Ice Storm as a movie about the end of the world. That's kind of how I've always read it. But Brokeback Mountain, first of all, two fearless performances from the late Heath Ledger and, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal, and playing two men that fall in love with one another. And it's handled so beautifully and done so well. And what an audacious choice from Ang Lee. I mean, the guy not only made The Ice Storm, but he goes off and he makes Life of Pi, or Gemini Man, or this, or lest we not forget The Incredible Hulk. There's a lot of diversity in terms of what he can do. One of our most gifted filmmakers, and this is one of his best movies. Fantastic, fantastic film. Bridge on the River Kwai, one of the great epics, of course, coming up at 75, which is, another David Lean film. What's not to love about Bridge on the River Kwai? But it's always interesting. Like, has this list, if they did it now 6 years later, would it be very different? I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, everybody has, we on the John Campy Show, and also people send me their top 10 lists or top 5 lists. And it's always curious for me to see what people like. And I think that what makes a film your favorite has a lot to do with when you saw it, who you saw it with, where you were at in your life. But I also do believe that there is an objective greatness. There's an inherent, it doesn't matter what your particular taste is. I've always said, which is very different from what John said, I think there is an objective greatness to art. It's not just subjective. It isn't. And I think it becomes more apparent which films are objectively good the more people that put them on their lists. Now, I think one day we'll have the kind of AI that we're going to need. Right now we don't, but we will eventually have the technology to, John's always saying, well, how can you measure someone's opinion? Well, we just don't have the technology where we've looked into doing that. We try and follow trends. There's marketing, all kinds of marketing data that they require, but it doesn't really, marketing data can only chart external data. But I think that eventually we're going to be able to chart emotional data. We're going to be able to look inside. The one thing that we still have, the one thing that with all of our technology that isn't being penetrated by Big Brother or Big Tech, is this idea that, well, what we have inside of us. Yet. Medical data is out there, but I mean, what's inside our souls? If we choose to, we can still keep those things to ourselves. And I'm sure that day is not going to be around for that much longer, but one never knows. Now I'm going to return to this list. We're 25% of the way through this list, but I thought it was fun to share something interesting and a way to sort of fuel the discussion. Now I wanted to jump back, and of course, if you want to contribute to the channel or contribute to the live conversation, you can either use the tip function that's in the description of this, or, as everyone knows, super chats. And I wanted to go, I'm getting a few super chats and things in early, so let's check those out. And first of all, no, there's a few that I don't want to miss them. John Hiroshi, I think it's Hiroshi. You just said you were trying out Stream Elements. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate that. Calvin Bose sent in a super chat saying they should change how movies are rated by the MPAA. That's a very interesting conversation. I find movies, if you go back and you watch movies of the 70s. I really think movies of the 70s had more mature themes. They were more frank. They dealt with more adult subjects. I mean, I think back, even as a kid, some of my favorite movies of all time, not just the Godfather movies, but movies like Network, movies like, of course, All That Jazz. I think the movies of the 70s might have been the most mature movies ever made. And I think the MPAA, most mature movies, I think the 70s had the most mature, most adult content, or at least presented in the most frank and adult manner in all of American film history. That's not to say we hadn't had frank and adult films before, but in terms of what was allowed and in terms of verisimilitude, the naturalism of movies of the 70s, both with in terms of film stock and in terms of what was presented. I mean, you think about movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or All the President's Men, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, Coming Home, the spate of Vietnam movies that we saw, The Deer Hunter, of course, All That Jazz. There was a lot of just, it was very frank, very adult, very mature. And I don't know if we're at that level of maturity anymore. But I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But the MPAA, I understand. Like, for instance, if you use the F word in a sexual context, like you can say F you, or you can say, you can't say motherfucker. You can't say that. That'll get you an R rating. But if you use the F word outside of a sexual connotation, then you can still have it be PG. But it's very interesting. Like, we as Americans are still very prudish when it comes to sexuality, but you can kill anybody you want on screen. It's very odd. And of course, I've told the story famously, well, at least famously to me, when I met Paul Verhoeven for the first time. He had brought his film Flesh and Blood to the Seattle International Film Festival. And it was, I want to say it was the closing night film. And at the closing night party, I think in 85, if memory serves, I talked to him for an hour. And we talked about the rating system, and he didn't understand how come you show a breast on in an American movie, you get an R rating, but if you cut that breast off, when he was being a little extreme, but if you were to kill that same woman on screen, you might not get an R rating, you might get a PG rating, and he didn't understand it at all, being obviously a European whose films, whether it was Spetters, whether it was Katie Tipple or Turkish Delight, or whether it was The Fourth Man, had a very frank portrayal of sexuality, because of course Europeans are just much more comfortable with being human beings than Americans are. They've had a lot more time to acclimate. They've gone through their Reformation, and they're always, even today, very, very less puritanical than we are. But I don't know. I mean, how would we do that, Calvin? How would we change how movies are rated by the MPAA? I actually think, to be honest, I think the MPAA does a pretty good job of rating movies. What I don't like is when movies have to be altered based on an MPAA rating. That's when things get a little dicey, because there's a lot of the time when you ask them, okay, well, what is it that you object to? And they don't necessarily know what that is. Willow sends in a tip and says, just to clarify my comment yesterday, I meant that my mom has watched and liked Out of Africa and Roman Holiday. Well, those are good movies that she should like. I tried showing her A New Hope yesterday. Let's just say it didn't go well. Well, again, I was talking about Charade as an Audrey Hepburn film, and I was going to say Breakfast at Tiffany's, but there's such a horrible Asian stereotype in that movie that perhaps you should never show that to your mom. So I'd stick with Charade. I tried showing her A New Hope yesterday. Let's just say it didn't go well. Well, what does that mean? I do expect, Willow, that you send in another letter, the exchange between you and your mom when you saw Star Wars Episode 1, A New Hope together. Did she get through the whole thing? Like, I want to know. Did she? Did she get through the whole thing? Otaku Senpai said, I would love a collaborative video on modern Trek between you and the Seventh Rule channel with Sirach Lofton and Ryan Husk. I sent detail in an email regarding this. Well, I'll have to look that up. Count me in. I like Ryan, of course, and Sirach Lofton. Definitely, I would love, I mean, what a great person to talk to. I'd love to hear from the horse's mouth. I'd love to talk to Sirach Lofton about what did he think of the evolution of his character from when he was first introduced, of course, in the pilot episode of Deep Space Nine, and how his character evolved and how the show went. That would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun. Tim over in Australia says, Timbula the Spider Monkey sent in a super chat and said, 100, Seven Samurais 100? Wow, really? It's my number one. I think it's a lot of people's number one, but interestingly enough, it's subtitled. I mean, I don't understand how you can't look at that and be like, oh my God, Seven Samurai definitely deserves to be higher up than 100, if only because of how much it inspired George Lucas. Ron, the good boy, sent in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, I'm confused. Top 3 movies of all time, Fellowship, King, and Two Towers. How is this not accepted by all of humanity? Well, what's funny to me is, I guess, having worked on those films, worked on the first 2, I jumped ship and didn't work on Return of the King. I probably should have, but then I wouldn't have been able to go to New Zealand for 14 months and work on Chronicles of Narnia. But I've always thought of the Lord of the Rings movies. I know they're 3 movies, but as one, maybe because they began life as one. They were shooting all the movies at the same time. That's not to say they didn't go in and do about 60 days of pickups on each one, but I think I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the most fully realized trilogy in cinema history. I really do. I think it's great. And those films are I've been talking about them a lot lately, and a lot of people talk about them a lot on the channel. So I need to go back and watch them. We watched them so many times, back and forth, making those documentaries, that I haven't gone back to watch them in a long time. And every time I do watch them, I see, one, just how handcrafted those movies really are. And when I say that, I mean, there was not a crew of 1,000 people moving from place to place. Sometimes there was a lot of people, but sometimes they were just going and doing shots in the woods or in the parking lot, or they're getting an extra miniature shot here and there. It was so, the process of making those movies was so iterative. It was so handcrafted. It was so just, I loved to see how the sausage was made. One of my favorite projects I ever worked on were those special features for the extended version of Lord of the Rings. And man, I love that stuff. But I mean, I understand, there's a lot of people that fantasy just isn't their thing. They can't get past that. For them, no verisimilitude. I don't know why, but that's sometimes the way it is. Willow Yang says she got through 15 minutes. Her mom got through 15 minutes of A New Hope. What? I still want to read that transcription. I mean, come on. Stephen Foley sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, watched 2 amazing movies this weekend, 1917 and, Weathering with You by Makoto Shinkai. Great anime film. Is this on your radar? No. Weathering with You. I don't know this. I would love to know this. I don't know this. I do not know. I do not know this, but that doesn't mean that it isn't great. Let's jump here. I've got a lot of letters that I haven't been covering. A lot of people. This one, I like this one right off the bat. This letter comes from Garen Gillum. Garen says, hey, Rob, this letter is a follow-up to Robservations episode 315, a.k.a. Epic Trek Rant. While I agree with you about the fundamental misunderstanding of modern Star Trek in the context of our real world, in other words, the poor writing of Star Trek from 2009 to the present, I believe there is justification for the premise of Star Trek Picard, going all the way back to the in-universe fiction of Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, first, I want to say that I'm not an advocate for the Picard storyline, or rather what we think that storyline will be. A corrupt, withdrawn Federation, synth terrorists, etc. I also don't want to prejudge it. I just want to point out the reasons while this particular future of the Federation was set up from The Next Generation and onward, in my opinion. First, let's look back at Star Trek, the original series, where the Federation is fairly young. By the way, when I first started watching Star Trek, it always seemed to me that the Federation was very young, perhaps only a generation old. This is supported by on-screen references to Earth being the operational authority of the Enterprise and the use of the United Earth Space Probe Agency instead of Starfleet, etc. What Garen is referring to is that the United Federation of Planets really was not mentioned until the second season of the original series of Star Trek, but the United Earth Space Probe Agency was. And yes, I know this was due to the show itself being new, and the world building was still being worked out, but those references are still canonical and shouldn't be entirely discarded, in my opinion. I don't think they should be either. But I digress. Let's get back to talking about the Federation of the original series. To me, the UFP as portrayed in the original series was more akin to the United Nations versus, say, a federal government like the United States. The worlds of the Federation, as it seemed to me, were still sovereign nations with ambassadors to the Federation, which also served as the council or decision-making body of the UFP. See Journey to Babel. That's from the second season of the original series. It all seemed to be a pretty loosely defined collection of planets and colonies, built more upon mutual defense, sharing of resources, and shared principles than a central government. I got the feeling that as a Federation member planet, you would be protected, and at the same time, you would be largely left alone to your own affairs. I did too. That's a very astute way of looking at it. By the way, even though I came to enjoy Star Trek Enterprise after disliking it immensely at first, I'm ignoring the retconning that show did. To me, Star Trek Enterprise belongs in a different timeline, perhaps in the same one as Discovery, and dare I say it, First Contact, but that's another letter. Now, let's look at the history and culture of Star Trek the original series as shown to us, the audience, by the people of Star Trek's future history. They are recognizable to us. We have passionate people, we have fun-loving people, we have serious people, we have argumentative people, we have emotional people, we even have jealous people. So we have real people, and we can relate to them quite easily. Yeah, we could fit all of this into the society once we took a few courses on the 23rd century. Moving on from the original series to the movies, whether it was due to the Voyager incident or an increased Klingon threat or something we hadn't heard about, there have been some changes. The Federation now has a president. There's a more permanent and defined Federation Council. The old ambassadors now represent their planets to other member planets versus the Federation itself, to the Federation itself. They're no longer the guiding body. Starfleet has become more militarized. Heck, it's even referred to as the military now. See Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. That being said, we still recognize this society as being similar to our own. We could fit in with these people and share a drink with them. We, as the audience, see something of ourselves in these folks. On to the era of the next generation. The Federation has grown exponentially. Starfleet has gone from 2,000 ships to 70,000 ships, and, oh yes, it's still a military organization. Picard. Starfleet now has frigates, and one is named the USS Renegade. That ship ain't doing any exploring. There are corrupt, self-serving, and power-hungry admirals. One, along with the others, illegally developed a Federation cloaking device and covered it up for years. Later on, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the most senior Starfleet admiral tried to take over the Federation with dozens of Starfleet captains on his side. And if they're not corrupt, these admirals of the TNG era are aloof, out of touch, and uncaring for the individual. At best, they are concerned with the larger good. I want to point to an episode of the Next Generation's second season that is undeniably great, but has a story that is damning to the Federation of this period, The Measure of a Man. I won't go into the entire plot because most of us know it, but let's remember something. The fact that Data even had to go through a trial to prove he's sentient is very telling. The man is a 20-year decorated Starfleet officer, yet the question remains whether or not he's property. There's something rotten in Starfleet and or the Federation here, a rot that, in my opinion, could not have been cleansed with one court case. And finally, we have Section 31, a secret organization that is allowed to commit murder in the name of the Federation with no accountability whatsoever, and is basically sanctioned by the powers that be. And screw the retconning that came later. I believe this organization came into being and was allowed to thrive post-TOS, if not pre. Now more on the Federation Society of the TNG era. Supposedly in the Federation of this era, it's all about the individual. Humans are free to pursue whatever interests they want and are encouraged to grow and improve themselves. Yeah, but what if they don't want to? I have the feeling that if someone just wanted to drink and shoot the shit all day, they would be looked down upon. This humanistic society seems stodgy, clinical, and dogmatic in its own way. I have nothing against the pursuit of the arts, classical music, and Shakespeare, but am I the only one who thinks the Federation of the Star Trek The Next Generation era is a bit lacking in passion and fun? Hey man, what about Risa? I mean, they have holodecks, and they go in there to look at the horizon and take walks and play act in novels. Come on, we all know what most of us would be using the holodeck for. It sort of reminds me how heaven was described when I used to be a Christian. Well, it happens and you can do whatever you want. But what if I want to blank, blank, blank? Well, you wouldn't want to do that in heaven because, you know, Jesus and love and stuff. But that sounds boring. I digress. I would like to say that Picard and some of the other main characters like Riker defy what I have described, but they are exceptions and not the norm. It seems to me Picard is the most human in this sterile, humanistic society. Riker is the most passionate. Many of the others are pretty boring, I have to say. Geordi, I'm talking to you. No offense to the brilliant LeVar Burton. Contrary to the humanity of Picard, the humanistic Federation of the Next Generation seems to be more about society, less about the individual. The non-interference directive has evolved into the seemingly survival of the fittest, or whatever happens directive. Picard, as did Kirk, may be one of the few who defies it. So yeah, I can see this Federation declining, I really can. Do I want that to be the central premise of Star Trek Picard? No, not really, but I can see how it could happen. By the way, contrary to my rant, I really do like Star Trek The Next Generation. That said, the original series is the one true Star Trek. Yes, it is. Haha. Geez, this letter went on way too long. I'm just going to submit it and hope it made some sense. Best, Garen G. Well, Garen, this is why I read these letters. What a great, thoughtful letter you have written. I have to say, I love this letter. And what's not to love about this letter? You know, here's what I love about our community is the letters that people are writing. Everybody's stepping up their letter writing game. And when I get letters like this, I mean, this is a very cogent, thoughtful analysis with great examples. And I mean, I love that you guys write these letters. And you know, it's amazing. I want to thank you for doing that. And sort of as another letter that I wanted to read along with this letter, which I think is really good, comes from Thomas Bartoldi. Thomas writes, "Hello, Rob, overseer of all things post-geek singularity, and my fellow imagination connoisseurs. Star Trek just doesn't feel like Star Trek anymore. I've heard this said. Humanity was a curious and yet peaceful explorer with no ill intentions of harming others. Humanity had reached the point where it had bettered themselves. Peace was sought over war, alliances over enemies. Star Trek was about peaceful exploration and humanity as a whole overcoming overwhelming odds. Not what it has become today. When it was still about those things, people loved it. We now seem to love what once was. Personally, in my heart, I know I shall always love Star Trek. People, I feel, sometimes look past Voyager, but I do not. I enjoyed Star Trek Voyager. That's why I feel like I'm going to share just what I enjoyed about this show. I will dive into what got this amazing show off to the great start that it was given. So set your phasers to stun, sit back, grab some Romulan ale or a blood wine if you happen to be into that. Well, how about some water? Or Klingon Gach, if you so dare. Be mindful of angering a Klingon woman or making them fall in love with you. Unless, of course, that's your thing. Who doesn't want Lursen Betor to, show them the ropes? So kick your feet up and enjoy. We won't call this some trip into the prime reality. No need, as this is a trip to the 24th century. The year is 2371, stardate 48315.6. To some, like myself, no need to really bother, am I Swedish? Bother with the 2009 movie timeline. The Federation is simply at odds with the Maquis. A Maquis ship has disappeared into the Badlands. On the ship is Tuvok. Both ships enter the Badlands. Voyager's mission being to find this ship. Of course, our beloved Catherine Janeway enlists the aid of Tom Paris. In Season 1, we are introduced to quite a cast of characters. Captain Catherine Janeway, a female captain who's quite tough, with her crew lost, and she blames herself for this, and she makes it her mission to get them home. She becomes more than just Voyager's captain. She becomes in many ways like a mother hen caring for what she feels is her responsibility now. Tuvok is chief of security and a Vulcan. Logic and all of that. Chakotay, he was Native American and believes in spirit animals, is a former Maquis. Captain, now Commander. Tom Paris is, well, Tom Paris. At first, you see a man who is simply an observer helping out. The son of an admiral who gets punished for being caught as a Maquis, but becomes much more as he becomes Voyager's pilot. B'Elanna Torres, a half-human, half-Klingon female with some anger issues, becomes chief engineer of Voyager. She has quite the interesting friends with Harry Kim. She too is a former Maquis, and she often calls Harry Starfleet. Harry Kim is human male. He's the ensign of Voyager. This is his first ship. He is the operations officer. He becomes good friends with both Tom and Torres, and he often calls Torres Maquis. Cass is a young female Ocampa with telepathic abilities who's in a loving relationship with Neelix. She's both a student and a friend to our doctor. She becomes almost like Janeway's daughter and tutors under Tuvok. Neelix, who is a Talaxian, becomes a guide and cook as well as a morale officer, often guiding the crew of the Voyager through the Delta Quadrant. And then we come to one of my favorite characters. Of course, Tom Paris is my favorite. No, the doctor. We come to perhaps one of my favorite characters. Of course, Tom Paris is your favorite. The doctor, an emergency hologram with no name who becomes the ship's doctor, who Kes teaches to have a personality of his own. One of my favorite episodes of the season 1 features the doctor saving the day in a very doctor-like way. Season 1 has heart and values at its core what Star Trek means when it comes to that very core of what Trek is supposed to mean. The first episode sends our beloved Voyager far from home. We learn of a being who did something terrible and wishes to make up for it. We see just how the crew comes together to start that journey home. Like classic Star Trek, there's an episode about a black hole and another about a nebula that is really alive. We are introduced to aliens who steal organs from others to fight their own illness. We come to see that even some monsters realize they have done a horrible thing. It's this series that I love that truly embraces what Star Trek should be. Then, of course, there's most likely my favorite episode where we see our beloved doctor save the day. Tom Paris is even accused of murder in one episode. If anything, I recommend watching this series. The episodes are quite compelling and have, in their own way, a powerful message to tell. The characters just make you love this show more. As always, your friend, Tom B. Peace and long life. Well, Thomas, a great letter, a fine letter. You know, I hear from more and more people how much they love Voyager, and Voyager is, at one point, was the most watched Star Trek show on Netflix, which I thought was interesting. So before I get back to the letters and your comments, why don't we go back and see where this list is at? We start out here at number 75 again, Bridge on the River Kwai, one of the great epic films, I think, of all time. If you guys haven't seen this movie, I mean, this movie really is what movies are all about from the beginning. Oh, that's the Great Escape. But anyway, Great Escape, Bridge on the River Kwai. You'll be whistling the theme from this. It's such a great movie and such a great ending. Alec Guinness is so great in this. If you love Star Wars and you haven't seen this film, oh my God, it's so good. Blazing Saddles at number 74. If you haven't seen Blazing Saddles, let me just say this movie is incredibly politically incorrect now. I love when people watch this now. They're all like, truly, it is a marvel, this film. All the President's Men, of course, based on the true story of the Nixon, the Watergate break-in, and how Woodward and Bernstein found their deep throat and blew the lid off of what was going on, which led to the impeachment and resignation of, the threatened impeachment and final resignation of President Richard Nixon. Alan Pakula, by the way, who directed this movie, Alan Pakula had an incredible run in the early 70s. I'll tell you, he made movies like The Parallax View. He made Clute, which recently came out on Blu-ray from Criterion. He also directed Presumed Innocent with Harrison Ford. I mean, the man knew how to make, and if memory serves, he made Malice with Alec Baldwin. Let me tell you something. I Am God. I love that movie. I love Alan Pakula is one of the great American directors of the 70s and even the 80s. He's really a hero, and any movie of his is great, but this film is obviously one of the most fantastic movies of the 70s, based on a real experience. Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, one of the great comedies ever made, right there. Him in Blazing Saddles. You can't go wrong with Mel Brooks at least as far as 70s Mel Brooks is concerned. Once you get to Men in Tights, yeesh. But Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, if you haven't seen them, they are quite amazing. Almost Famous at number 71, a movie near and dear to my heart. I love this movie. I identify with this movie. I prefer the bootleg version or the untitled version. That's the longer version. It is on Blu-ray. You can get it. I love this movie. I could watch this movie over and over and over again. The coming-of-age story, basically the character of William Miller, who's a proxy for director and writer Cameron Crowe himself, famously began writing for Rolling Stone magazine when he was very underage. And this story details that part of his life. Talks about the 70s and the travails of a rock band, Stillwater, as they try and make good. And everything about this movie, from Philip Seymour Hoffman's portrayal of Lester Bangs, the famous rock critic who's playing a real guy, to everybody on, it's just Billy Crudup playing the lead of Stillwater, and Kate Hudson was radiant as Penny Lane. What a great movie. One of Hitchcock's best. I mean, Vertigo at 70. Like, you talk about the best movies ever made, Vertigo's, it's been vying neck and neck with Citizen Kane over the last few years, but it's number 70 on this list. Again, probably everything you need to know about Alfred Hitchcock in one movie. I prefer Vertigo to, I prefer Rear Window to Vertigo, but still, Vertigo's a great movie. I mean, now when you try to watch it, admittedly, it's a little deliberately paced, but still an incredible, incredible film. Hitchcock at the height of his powers. But number 70, this movie, Maximus Decimus Meridius, Gladiator at number 69, Lamau. I love this movie. I could watch this movie forever. It's fantastic. For some inexplicable reason, Elizabeth, I can't explain it to her. I have like 6 copies of this movie on Blu-ray. I got steelbooks. I got different releases. I love this film. And as Maximus says here, famous quote, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." Damn right. You know, Nick Cave wrote a sequel to this movie, apparently, at one time, where the gods, it was going to open with the gods of Olympus and Maximus in the afterlife, and the gods decide to breathe life into him and send him back to Earth or whatever. Man, I would totally have loved to see that movie. I really would. By the way, Big Chief Studios was making the first official 6-scale action figure of the Spaniard. It has yet to come out. Where is it, Big Chief Studios? I hope it gets made, because I have 3 unauthorized third-party figures of Maximus, and I would like to get a real one that was done correctly. But hey, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, of course, co-directed by Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones, at number 68, another one of the great comedies of all time. Unlike some, I always expect the Spanish Inquisition. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you can't go wrong with this movie. Who doesn't love this? Surprisingly, listen to all you people. I have never heard, I love Avatar. I understand, it's classical storytelling. I love this movie. I find it to be full of awe and wonder, which is what I like from my fantasy and science fiction movies. I think it's great. I don't understand why there's all this, like, hatred. It's almost become hip to not like this movie. And I think the people that don't like this movie are unhip. How can you not like Cameron's work? And I get it. There's so much staggering imagination in every frame of this film. I understand. All of Cameron's stories are very meat and potatoes. They're very classical. They're simplistic by design. And I just think this movie is a marvel of movie making, and I never get tired of it. And I'm happy to see that it was up. I mean, I don't think it belongs higher than the other necessarily. The other, 33 movies that are above it. But I still love Avatar. The Lion King, I know there's some of you at 66 are going to say, oh, well, it's Disney ripping off Kimba the White Lion or the Japanese. Probably true. But who doesn't love Lion King? Hakuna Matata, that's what I always say. Why not? Raging Bull, Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull. How come they have a color picture from the black and white picture from The Deer Hunter, but a color picture here of Raging Bull? This is the kind of attention to detail that I have to come after them and say, hey, man, what's up? Many people say Raging Bull, the story of boxer Jake LaMotta, is one of Martin Scorsese's, well, if not his greatest film, certainly up there with his greatest films. So good. This movie's an incredible film, and it was really the first movie that I remember where an actor, in this case Robert De Niro, went through a pretty stunning physical transformation. He pounded on a lot of weight to play an older Jake LaMotta, whose fighting days were long behind him. But this film is a tour de force of movie making. It really is amazing. Great stuff. And of course, Mary Poppins. People might be surprised to find this out, but Mary Poppins, I think, is one of the great movies ever made. It's certainly one of the greatest fantasy films ever made. And Julie Andrews, has there ever been a central performance in a movie that's more beloved than Julie Andrews? I don't know of one. Man, I've always loved this movie. I loved it when I was a kid. I love it now. It has lost none of its charm. There's been, nothing like this. When Disney was still alive, obviously, this movie came out 2 years before Disney passed away in 1966. And to me, what Disney was doing, during the Disney era when he was alive, making everything from Treasure Island to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to In Search of the Castaways or Mary Poppins, there was a lot of great live action movies that were made under his watch. I keep talking about That Darn Cat, which was from 1965. It was Haley Mills' sixth movie for Disney and last movie for Disney. Came out just before this as well. I mean, the Disney live action features from 1950 on to Walt Disney's death were all pretty great, but I don't think anything, although while 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a different kind of a movie and it's one of the great fantasy films ever made and I love it. If you guys have not seen, if you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post Geek Singularity community, if you have not seen 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, run, don't walk if you have Disney Plus and go and watch it, because it is an astonishingly great film. And what I loved about the Disney live action features, at least when Walt Disney was alive, is they're not for kids. They're for everybody. And I think Mary Poppins, a lot of people think this is a kid's movie, and yes, there are kids in it, and yes, obviously it appeals to children, but I do think this movie appeals to everybody. What a timeless classic that is. Groundhog Day. Another a film that, the late great Harold Ramis directed this. It's 1993. This has a great fantasy premise. A man is basically stuck in a time loop. This could have been a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, but it's not. It's played for laughs. What a terrific, terrific movie. Again, this is a movie that everybody looks back on fondly. A great performance by Andie MacDowell and, of course, Bill Murray. Who doesn't love Groundhog Day? And indeed, it is. It's a science fiction movie. The idea that you're stuck in a time loop, a temporal loop, is absolutely sci-fi. I don't know if people think of it as sci-fi, but it certainly is. It's got a great science fiction time travel premise, or time stuck premise. Another great film. North by Northwest, more Hitchcock. A lot of people think North by Northwest, they'll put North by Northwest above Vertigo or even above Rear Window. I like North by Northwest, but I don't think it belongs there. It's a little... I don't love it as much. It's still great, but I don't love it as much. I might even like Charade better, and Charade was not directed by, of course, Alfred Hitchcock, although everybody thinks it was. It was directed by Stanley Donen. But, West Side Story, which Steven Spielberg is remaking, that comes out at the end of this year. I love this film. The people that say I don't like musicals, watch this musical. It's co-directed by Jerome Robbins, who choreographed the film, and Robert Wise, who obviously directed not only Star Trek the Motion Picture, but The Sound of Music, The Andromeda Strain, The Day the Earth Stood Still. He edited Citizen Kane and Cat People. This film is a tour de force. It's a little strange when it's about the gang rivalry between the white gangs and the Puerto Ricans in New York in the early 60s and late 50s, but it's still, what a great movie. I've seen this movie in 70 millimeter a number of times, and if you ever get a chance, see this movie on a big screen with a very loud sound system. I love all the songs. It's just, what a great movie. And Rita Moreno, man, is she sexy. She's so sexy in this movie. Natalie Wood's beautiful, but Rita Moreno, woo, scorching hot. I want to live in America with Rita Moreno. in the 1960s. Amelie. This movie was directly responsible for me getting together with my girlfriend Elizabeth. We sort of bonded over the internet before we met over our mutual love of Amelie. This movie, to me, is I love this film, and it pretty much embodies my entire worldview, if that makes any sense. The great joy and delight you can find being alive just in your own neighborhood, the magic you can see on a rooftop, or it's just everything about this film touches my heart. This and Almost Famous I could probably watch on an endless loop forever, and I would just be smiling the whole time. If you have not seen Amelie, again, I wouldn't call it. This is a magical. This film embodies the whole idea of magical realism, but it is just an unbelievably beautiful movie. And it's interesting. Elizabeth and I saw director Jean-Pierre Jeunet speak at the Egyptian Theater here in Hollywood, and she did get her French. We went and got an original French poster, and she got it signed. Elizabeth got it signed. But it was interesting because this film is heavily stylized, and it made when it came out in 2001, it made use of digital grading, which was new at the time. They even created proprietary software when they were working on Fellowship of the Ring, which if you watch the Fellowship of the Ring extended edition, I did a piece on digital grading for that Blu-ray, or DVD. It's Blu-ray now, but digital grading was new. And it was interesting hearing Jeunet speak about this particular film because he says he might have gone too far because the coloring is really extreme. I don't think so. Even watching it on the big screen this past year, I think it still works, and I think the color saturation adds to the whole idea of the film. And this is by no means people might think it's namby-pamby. It's not. I mean, poor Amelie's mother. Wait till you see what happens to her. But and this film doesn't shy away from sexual content or any of that. But it's just delightful. I mean, this movie actually it'd make a good double bill with Mary Poppins if you want to watch Mary Poppins. There's a lot of thematic similarities. I think there. Just don't watch this movie with young kids. Thelma and Louise at number 59. What a great movie. One of Ridley Scott's best films, I think. Of course, a zeitgeist movie at the time. I wonder what would have happened if this movie came out. I mean, 91. It's hard to believe that we're already 29 years away from when almost 30 years ago this came out. But, would this have been that movie? This movie was an anthem when it came out. And in our post Me Too, #MeToo days, I'm sure this movie would have been just as accepted now as it was back then. I mean, it's still an anthem. Obviously, Brad Pitt delivers a great early performance. Everyone was swooning over him, and Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, their tale of sisterhood and liberation is fantastic. And what a terrific movie. I still love this film. God, it's beautifully shot. Everything about it. One of my favorite screenplays of all time, Sunset Boulevard, a movie that is actually narrated by a dead man. This film has a lot of truth in it. If you haven't seen this movie, it's one of the great, I'd call it a noir. Billy Wilder, of course, one of our great directors of all time. If anyone out there doesn't like black and white movies, I implore you, this is one of the first movies on the list along with Seven Samurai. Watch this movie because the story is macabre. It's all about what Hollywood can do to people, especially women, actresses as they age in this business. I mean, things are getting better. I just noticed that in the new season of Frankie and Johnny, Jane Fonda, who's 82 now, is married to Peter Gallagher. So you go, girls. But in this movie, Gloria Swanson is Norma Desmond. My God, what a film. What a film. If you haven't seen this movie, run, don't walk, get this movie. Now, Dark Knight, surprisingly high on this list. I mean, I know everyone loves The Dark Knight, one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. I love this movie. I think it's my favorite of all these sort of post 9/11. Some men just want to watch the world burn. If anything, that our era of living through eras, it hasn't gone away, but in a post 9/11 world, some men just want to watch the world burn. I think nothing encompassed that idea than this film. The idea of the Joker being an agent of chaos. Love this movie. What an incredible performance this is. Number 57. 56, another great science fiction film. I consider this a science fiction film. Also a great romance, a great relationship movie. It has a lot to say about memory, obviously, The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Michael Gondry. What a fantastic movie, and a great performance by Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet. Wow, how much did it make? 44 million. The quote, "Why do I fall in love with every woman I see who shows me the least bit of attention?" Again, the great movies all have truth in them. This is a fantastic movie, if you haven't seen it. Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's breakthrough movie. I mean, some might say it was Mean Streets, but his team up with De Niro here. We saw Harvey Keitel, Jodie Foster. This film, of course, written by Paul Schrader, Sybil Shepherd. This is one of the great. The Joker, Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker this year I don't think it would exist without the influence that this movie exerted on it. If you haven't seen Taxi Driver, what's wrong with you? This movie had the Bernard Herrmann score, and the way it is shot. I mean, this film has lost none of its power, none of its hypnotic power. I mean, talk about an anti-hero. There's so much of the Joker. If you love the Joker but haven't seen Taxi Driver, this movie will absolutely deepen your appreciation for that film. This is one of the classics. Probably, I might. There's been a lot of great movies of the 70s, but I don't know if there's a movie that encapsulates, at least 70s New York than this. I mean, you could talk about French Connection, you could talk about Godfather, but in terms of where America was, in terms of where New York City was when this came out in 76, yeah, this movie, what a rough one. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, directed by, of course, the great George Roy Hill. One of the great team-ups of all time, Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Such a great, it's 1969, dude. A great year for movies, and this is one of the best. And it was great because George Roy Hill was able to capitalize on the success he had with this movie, and he ended up making Slaughterhouse-Five, which just came out from Arrow on Blu-ray, the science fiction novel based on Kurt Vonnegut's book. What a great film. If you haven't seen this, what are you waiting for? Good Will Hunting. I mean, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck win their Academy Award for writing this film, and what a great movie. Gus Van Sant directing. A terrific film. Robin Williams, what a great performance he gave at number 53, Good Will Hunting. I think you've all seen that. Now here, my friends, Best Picture 1950, All About Eve at number 52. This movie is one of my favorite films of all time. I always maintain that this has maybe my favorite screenplay of all time. I mean, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. One of the great lines of dialogue ever written for the movie. The great Margot Channing, as played by Bette Davis. Anne Baxter is one of my favorite evil villainesses in this movie, even though when I say that, she's just, if you've ever worked in Hollywood, if you've ever worked in the arts, this movie and Sunset Boulevard. As a matter of fact, Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve might be the greatest double feature in the history of motion pictures. Watch them both. Don't watch them both at the same time because they need to be savored. You watch them, you don't answer your phone, you don't look at anything, you just immerse yourselves in the world. Sunset Boulevard takes place in, of course, L.A., and All About Eve takes place in New York. All About Eve is about the theater, Broadway, and of course, Sunset Boulevard is about the movies. There's a bit of crossover to the two, and both of these movies are so good. Of course, number 51, The Big Lebowski, perhaps maybe the greatest cult movie of all time. I know, Rocky Horror fans, I know, but The Big Lebowski is definitely up there. And what a great movie. The Coen brothers, a timeless film, and obviously you can tell why Hollywood likes these movies. And at number 50, something I don't even think belongs in the top 100, even though it's Spielberg, And remember, this is a list of Hollywood's favorite movies. People that work in Hollywood. Jurassic Park at number 50. Okay. I mean, I guess so. If that's what you want to, if that's what you want to call it. All right. Well, we'll stop there and see. We'll go back to. I love doing this. I love being able to look at everybody's chats and things like that. Let's see. Wow. Wow. A lot of people have been sending in chats. So where are we at? Oh, Calvin Bose sent in a super chat. My problem with, hey, oh, look at this. No one's been here yet. I guess not only am I back to what you guys are saying, it's cookie time. And far be it for me, it's a Sunday afternoon, far be it for me to not have cookie time, right? You going to come up for some cookies? All right. This is Tallulah, of course. She is not Gilbert. She's not as well known. Are you as well known? Where's your brother? Gilbert's missing cookie time. But you're here. Do you want a third cookie? All right. Tallulah, unlike Gilbert, she is an Irish doodle. She's very pretty, but she has a supersonic... Oh, look who came. Okay, you got to get down, Tallulah. You got to get down because look who showed up. Okay. Please get down. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Gilly. Now it's your turn. Come on up, bud. Yes, Gilbert. There's Gilbert. He wants his cookies, too. Were you outside playing? Is that what you were doing? Huh? I know. You'll get a cookie. Yeah, buddy. And you get a third cookie. How about that? Yes, you do. Because you're such a good boy. Yes. Good boy, buddy. Just don't get tied up in the headphones. There you go, bud. So there you go, everybody. You can't have a show without Gilbert and Tallulah. It's cookie time. Anyway. Hey, Tallulah, you are no, you can't. You already had cookies. Yes, you can't have double cookies. This is no. What do you think I am? Calvin Bose says my problem with the MPAA is if a major studio gets a scene that's an R. If an independent shows the same scene, they get NC-17. Well, you are correct. I mean, hey, no. They're not always equal. I mean, obviously, major studios with the money can exert power over the MPAA. But there isn't a lot of NC-17 movies that are getting released now. We just don't see that much anymore. And I mean, that's definitely true. Why are you barking, Tallulah? Why are you growling? You've had enough cookies. She's had enough cookies. But so, all right, you get one more. That's it. Here you go. You have to stop. But yes, I mean, it is not always fair. that is true. But you know what? It's independent movies that are making. I don't know what rating Blue is the Warmest Color got here in this country. I would assume it would get an NC-17. But I think the rating system in general is. I don't know why Tallulah is being obnoxious. I don't know. I mean, I think it's changing. We just don't have studios making. What were the 50 Shades of Grey movies rated? I think they were. No, Tallulah. No. These dogs have been eating my books. For anybody who doubts whether Don Winslow is a great author, Tallulah ate my. Why are you being this way? Why are you being so crazy? She ate my Temple of the Dog, one of the great books about drug cartels ever written. Why are you being like this? Huh? Why? You got to come down. You got to get down. You can't be demanding of my time the way some people are. Right? You got to let me talk. I'm on the middle of a live show. Come on, babe. You can do it. You can get down. Yes, you can. Huh? Yeah, get down. That's good. All right. Back to the ratings. Yes, the MPAA isn't always. They're not always. They can be bought. And I think the ratings are weird. Again, everybody only runs afoul of the ratings really when it comes to, I mean, extreme violence, yes, but usually it's about sexuality, which I think is sort of strange, but what can you do? Tim Yell of the Spider Monkeys sent in a tip and said, "It's been a while since I sent you a letter, so I'm currently working on one, but it's taking me a while. It's on the subject close to our hearts and one I've shied away from for so long. Star Trek. My thoughts on where it's gone and why it means so much to me." Well, Tim, send that goodness in. I mean, it is Picard week after all. By the way, I won't even be here to watch Picard and then do another show. As we all know, I'm going to be traveling. I'll be in New York City next week. I'm going to try and do shows. They might be brief, but Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I'm in New York, and then I come home on Monday, and then I fly up to Portland on Tuesday to do a shoot for Crisis Medicine. I'm directing 2 more 2-hour shows for our Crisis Medicine lecture series. So you've all been warned. Jay Canada sent in a tip. "Hey, Rob, do you like the Shaw Brothers films? I used to love watching late-night kung fu back in the day, and we would pretend to fight off hordes of enemies in a wooded area as a kid. Fave is Executioners of Shaolin and the 38th Chamber of Shaolin. Those are both great movies. But everybody knows what my favorite Shaw Brothers film is. Say it with me now. The Super Inframan." People are probably going, "Wait, what?" That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Super Inframan is the Shaw Brothers' foray into superhero movies, and it was totally a ripoff of Ultraman. But, unlike some ripoffs, it's awesome. Even Roger Ebert, I discovered this movie before I'd seen it. I had seen Roger Ebert back on Siskel and Ebert. I don't know, it was the late 70s or early 80s. They had a Guilty Pleasures show. And he talked about the Super Inframan and how much he loved it. And the villain's name, the female villain, is Princess Dragon Mom. And the Super Inframan has been released on DVD, but it was released on Blu-ray by the UK's 88 Films. So if you're interested in getting it, it's awesome. I mean, it's awesome if you are open to that kind of entertainment. If you like Asian sci-fi, if you like Asian superheroes. By the way, I have a quarter scale Kamen Rider, the first Kamen Rider figure from Japan, and it's awesome. And why isn't he on my desk? I don't know. I have to go find him. I'm slowly but surely going to build the wall. You'll see the Hot Toys wall, the collection. So much to see. But that's Jay. That's my favorite of the Shaw Brother movies, is the Super Inframan. But that's not to say that the 30. But did I say 38th? The 36th Chamber of Shaolin isn't awesome, because it is. Yes. A fan of Peanuts sent in a super chat. "Rob, I'm curious. How did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood get so much attention at the Oscars, yet My Name is Dolomite, Dolomite is my name, did not? No costume nod either." Look, Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino is very well liked in Hollywood. I have to say, flat out, while I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a second time, and I enjoyed it quite a bit more than the first time I saw it, it is not, to me, top-tier Tarantino. And when I say top-tier Tarantino, my favorite I still like Reservoir Dogs the most. I know, City on Fire and all that, but when I saw Reservoir Dogs as a low-budget indie movie, I was blown away by it. I was really blown away by it. Of course, I love Pulp Fiction. I think my favorite Tarantino movies are Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Inglourious Bastards. But, you know, I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is fine, but it doesn't resonate with me. I know all about the end, and I love the evocation of the period of late 60s LA, but there isn't enough going on in the movie. And I know it's a hangout movie, but still, and I think why people like it in Hollywood is because it's about Hollywood. People in Hollywood love movies about Hollywood, and there's things in it like the Cinerama Theater, my beloved Cinerama Dome Theater that appears in the movie. Elizabeth and I were there opening night. We were sitting in the Cinerama Dome watching the movie when the Cinerama Dome itself appeared in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And for that alone, I really enjoyed it. And, you know, when I was when John Campea and I were broadcasting from a studio in Hollywood, when I first came onto the John Campea show, I would walk up onto Hollywood Boulevard because I took the train back to Pasadena, and I would love it. I would love strolling up on Hollywood Boulevard. And after they shot Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there were a lot of the billboards that they made for the show left up, like the billboard they had for the Invaders, for Roy Finnis and the Invaders, and I loved seeing that. It was a lot of fun, and I think, look, everybody loves Brad Pitt, everybody loves Leonardo DiCaprio, and it is a really great movie, and it is a lot of fun. I think the problem, that was one of those movies where I expected something different, and now that I have the disc, I have the 4K disc, and I've watched it repeatedly, and I feel better about it. I feel better about the movie. But yeah, why Dolomite? You know, Dolomite is, to me, I love Tim Burton's Ed Wood because, again, it's another movie about passion, the passion that you need to make movies. I mean, anybody who sets out to make a movie and actually finishes a movie making, to me, whether you're good or bad at it, is one of the great examples of optimism you can have. Because it's not, anybody can write a script, you know, I guess anybody can make a movie, but movie making is really hard because you need multiple people, you have to manage personalities, and it's a multidisciplinary process. And when you get to the end, you know, you've really done a lot, and not everybody can do that. And I really think that, like, you have Ed Wood, but Dolomite Is My Name is, to me, it's such a celebratory film. Everybody was having such a good time. I love all the actors that were in it. I thought it was beautifully directed. I thought Eddie Murphy was great as Rudy Ray Moore. The film is so much fun. I don't know. It definitely deserved a costume nod. But I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know how. I don't know, man. I don't know. Paul Mayall sent in a super chat and says, "Love the channel, dude." Well, Paul, I love you for supporting the channel, but I love you more for saying that. That's very nice. It's very nice. Jeffrey Mao is here. Jeffrey Mao says, "Willow's mom sounds a lot like my mom, but not as funny." Her most frequent response to me saying I'm going to watch a film was, "Who's in it?" My most frequent response was, "No one you know." In my mind, who's in it was the least important aspect. Yeah, I've developed an affinity for Chinese mothers in my life, and I think one of the great joys, especially if you know somebody whose mom is first generation Chinese immigrant, there's nothing better when they've been here long enough to recognize certain people, to sit down with a Chinese mom and listen to their commentary during a movie. It's wildly entertaining. And that's why I want Willow to send in more letters about the conversation she has with her mother. Garen Gillum says, "I bought and watched Slaughterhouse-5. It has one of my favorite car chases that is not really a car chase of all time. Next, Star Crash." Well, what Garen is saying, by the way, thanks for the tip, Garen. Garen is clearly taking my lead and watching movies that I've mentioned on the show. Now, I just want to point out that while I love Star Crash, and I do love Slaughterhouse-5, I would not put them on the same tier. You're going to watch Star Crash, and you're going to ask yourself, what the hell, dude? Not only does Star Crash have no verisimilitude in it, but it is a cheap Italian knockoff of Star Wars. Now, some people would say the only reason that I like it is because Caroline Munro is just smoking hot in the movie, which is why, yes, up here I have a action figure of her from Star Crash. But what I love about Star Crash is the movie that I would have made as a 10-year-old after just seeing Star Wars. I mean, it feels like that. There is so much. Basically, Star Crash borrows from Ray Harryhausen movies and Star Wars and all kinds of things. I mean, David Hasselhoff is in it. Marjo Gortner is in it. Joe Spinell plays Count Zartharn, that literally has a spaceship that's a giant hand, his base, and it turns into a fist. I mean, so it's hilarious. Star Crash is hilarious, but there's something about the verve and the joy that like you can't remember. It was shot in Italian, so they shoot it MOS, mid out sound. So when they shoot these movies, like when you watch Dario Argento movies or whatever, you might ask yourself, why does all the dialogue is recorded later? They don't record sound on set, and they do that. It's just easier to shoot. If you don't have to record sound, you do it later, and you can also replace and dub the actors with actors who speak different languages. Star Crash is like that as well. So even when they speak English, it's all post-synced. And then Christopher Plummer shows up, as the leader of the universe. And it's got this John Barry score. How they got John Barry to score this music or put his music. It's great. The score is great, by the way. So when you watch Star Crash, don't expect what you got from Slaughterhouse 5. Orville Nation says, Rob, will we see you doing a documentary film someday about the Orville? Hey, you know what? I don't know if somebody's doing that, but I would love to do that. I think that would be great. I mean, now that Doug Drexler is working on the Orville, I should contact him and see if there's any interest. Certainly, Seth MacFarlane participated in our documentaries for Next Gen, so that could be a lot of fun. I would love to do that. I would love to. I mean, it might be that this season of the Orville could be the last now that Seth MacFarlane has a new deal. I don't know. Maybe there won't be, but I would love to do that. It would be great. Jeff Bond, my friend Jeff Bond, wrote a book on the Orville, so I think that could be great. Mark C says, a film that captures 70s New York better than Taxi Driver is Serpico. Serpico is actually a true story based on a cop who ends up informing on his fellow cops, and Al Pacino plays that role. But, look, I would say, okay, but Taxi Driver is more of a phantasmagoria. Serpico's based on a true story, whereas as Taxi Driver, even from the opening, it's Taxi Driver is more about not necessarily New York. There's a heightened reality there. Even from the beginning, watching the slow motion shots of the taxi cars in the beginning, and the smoke coming up out of from the subway cars and the subway tunnels. I mean, Taxi Driver is very, very stylized. But yes, Serpico also does a terrific job of capturing 70s New York. But Taxi Driver is, I think, more. I mean, it's not a documentary, obviously, but you're not incorrect. Mark C. also says, Jurassic Park at 50 on a list by people in Hollywood. How many times did Perry Nemiroff write? Look, Perry Nemiroff, I like Perry Nemiroff. And, again, people like what they like. I think, Jurassic Park is is it Jaws? No. But I will say Jurassic Park, when I saw it for the first time, as somebody who grew up watching dinosaur movies like Valley of the Gwangi and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the portrayal of photorealistic dinosaurs was unbelievable. I keep the whole Sam Neill thing when he takes off his glasses. That whole thing. That was awesome. And I felt the exact same way that he did when he took off his glasses. I mean, it was great. Dancing Dog sent in a tip and says, Robert, I'm going to get on my old man pedestal and remind today's genre fans that back in my day, we only had Star Trek reruns, Space 1999, Gene Roddenberry trying to launch Earth 2 twice, UFO earlier, and The Strange Star Lost. Fans today are lucky. Well, Dancing Dog is quite right. Yes, we live in an embarrassment of riches. We absolutely do. When I was a kid, as I said, Manimal and Automan got me all in a lather. Like, oh my God. And we get a science fiction show that I actually liked as a kid, The Fantastic Journey. And of course, it lasts 7 or 8 episodes and is gone. For those of you who don't know what The Fantastic Journey is, it's a story about a family that gets basically shipwrecked in the Bermuda Triangle, and they're on an island. And each time they go further onto the island, you go into a different time zone. I know. But it seemed good at the time. I was a kid. It was what we got. But hey, you know what, Dancing Dog? we still got like the $6 million Man, and we got the Bionic Woman, and we got Kolchak the Night Stalker. There was stuff. And we got those badass TV movies of the 70s, movies like Killdozer and Satan's School for Girls and Bad Ronald and The Stranger Within. I mean, there was some stuff. You had to look for it, but there was some stuff. And then, of course, there's a lot of great exploitation movies, but you're right. Nowadays, we live in an embarrassment of riches, and these young whippersnappers don't know how good they have it. But hey, we live in a world where Clint Eastwood is almost 90 and he's still directing movies. Ridley Scott, Scorsese, they're still out there. So, and I'm still talking to you, surrounded by comic books and action figures. We live in interesting, heady times, my friends, and we imagination connoisseurs, we're having a terrific time of it. Stubble McShave sent in a tip and said, there's no way that Tarantino stops at 10 movies, especially if he doesn't win an Oscar for direction on Best Movie. So far, he's only won for writing. That is a good observation. I think, look, if you're Quentin Tarantino and you love movies as much as he did, by the way, somebody sent me, Dave Hasensturm, my friend Dave Hasensturm, sent me it's a podcast, and I want to say it was Review or something. These guys have been doing it for a while. I'd never heard the podcast before, but they do a look. It's Quentin Tarantino with these guys, and I forget the name of the podcast, but I listened to the whole thing, where they talk about Abel Ferrara's King of New York. And it's an awesome, awesome podcast. So look up Quentin Tarantino, King of New York podcast. Those two guys doing it, they really know their stuff. That conversation, I guess it was the third time Quentin Tarantino has appeared on their podcast. I'm going to go back and check it out. And let me just say, it was dope. It was really, really good. A really great podcast. I highly recommend everybody go listen to that. But Stubble, I think you're right. I think Tarantino wants to win it. And why wouldn't he? I know he's won an Academy Award, but he wants to win a directing Academy Award. Why wouldn't you? I mean, if I would. If I had Quentin Tarantino's career, I'd love to win a directing award. I've won a writing award. I won a Best New Writer award from the AFI Film Festival for writing Free Enterprise. Evan Newman sends in a tip and says, Rob, what are your thoughts on John Carpenter's The Fog? I saw it for the first time last night and ordered the Shout Factory Blu-ray right after. Really enjoyed it. Perfect viewing for a late night when you need to scratch that horror itch. Well, Evan, I love The Fog. And by the way, let me just say, not that you've already bought it, but again, Studio Canal released 4 John Carpenter movies in the UK on 4K. And they first came out in 4-disc sets. And now they released them as movie-only versions. And 4K discs are not region-coded. And I love The Fog. And famously, when it first was made, it wasn't scary. They had to go back and do reshoots with Rob Bottin. But I think The Fog is a near-perfect ghost story. I love Carpenter's score in it. I love Adrian Barbeau. This is KAB, Antonio Bay. I'm Stevie Wayne. I mean, I love The Fog. Mrs. Cobritz. What happens to her? John Houseman telling that story about the Elizabeth Dane, and it's great. The Fog's great. I think is it Roy Arbogast who did the physical effects? The combination of optical effects and actual physical fog effects are great. Of course, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, and it's just Tom Atkins is great. Everything about The Fog is awesome. And Rob Bottin, it's great. I love it. I know what it must have been like to see The Fog for the first time last night, because you must have clearly you had a great time because you ordered the Shout Factory disc, which, by the way, is great. The Shout Factory disc is great. I love The Fog. Again, early Carpenter, classic Carpenter. It's very influential. Early Cronenberg and early Carpenter, very much influential for me, and I'm a huge fan. And how great is his widescreen photography in that movie? Woo! Ashley Short is here. Hi, Rob. Sending a tip. I am going to the cinema is still very much an event for me, and nothing could be better than rounding out a trip than having a bite to eat with my friends after. Five Guys seems to be our unanimous favorite. What is your favorite eatery of choice? Well, now, when you say Five Guys, you're talking about burgers. I have to say, In terms of burgers, there's a place that Alec Peters, of all people, turned me on to called Freddy's. And it's steak burgers, man. The only one, there's the closest one's like 45 minutes away from here. I love Freddy's. But, my eatery of choice, well, that's a tough one. I mean, I wouldn't say it's fast food, although I love burgers. I do love burgers. My eatery of choice. I think my favorite restaurant that I go to a lot that's close, it's within walking distance of my house, is this sushi place, this Japanese sushi place that's down on Colorado Boulevard. Kaibo, I think it's called. But I don't know. I don't have I like going there. I mean, and I really like another eatery of choice here is Porto's. I don't remember. It's a Mexican place in here in Pasadena that I love. It's got really great food, great mole, great drinks, but yeah, I don't know. That's not a bad question. I don't have a very good answer though. Orville Nation says, if you ever do, meaning do a documentary, I would love to assist in any way. I will keep that in mind. Absolutely, I will. Let's see. Why don't we jump back into our list and see where we're going to go with it. So we are at number 50 was Jurassic Park. Let's drop down. Rear Window, my favorite Hitchcock movie. It's higher up than Vertigo at number 49. If you don't, as I've said before, if I could marry a character in a movie, it would be Grace Kelly's character from Rear Window. She is my single movie crush of all time. If you want to have a crush on a fictional character that doesn't exist, Grace Kelly's character in Rear Window is probably a good one to have a crush on. I'm just always astonished how she packs an overnight bag in that movie. But she's so devoted, she's so beautiful. There's no wonder that Prince Rainier married her. The Usual Suspects, a movie that I actually produced the special features for, along with Carrie David, and Dave Parker and I worked on that. Still very proud of this. The special features have never been released on Blu-ray, which is a damn shame. I would really like to see a new transfer of The Usual Suspects done, and I would like to see my special features back on that because we spent a long time doing them, and I think they're really good. Some Like It Hot, another Billy Wilder movie from 1959, peak Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis. Come on, this movie's so funny. And Jack Lemmon. It's one of the great comedies of all time. So great. Saving Private Ryan. I like Saving Private Ryan, but again, look, its depiction, the attack on Omaha Beach, the invasion of Normandy is I don't think there's war has ever been portrayed like that before this, obviously, or since. It's amazing. The entire Call of Duty video game series owes a great debt of gratitude to the opening of this movie. Again, another great Tom Hanks movie. Titanic. My love for Avatar is only eclipsed, perhaps, by my love of Titanic. I love this movie. I know you're melancholy. I don't presume to know why. Who doesn't love Titanic? I know. It's meat and potatoes. It's very basic storytelling, but it gets me every time. And the horror of the Titanic sinking, but I love Leonardo DiCaprio. I love Kate Winslet, and I love this movie. I love Kathy Bates as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Come on, man. Who doesn't love Titanic? Number 44, The Matrix. Again, we've talked a lot about The Matrix. One of the most surprising science fiction movies I've ever seen. Set the tone, certainly for... has The Matrix ever been surpassed? I don't know. What a great movie. Love this film. Love The Matrix so much. Toy Story at number 43. Who doesn't love Toy Story? I think Pixar, while they had done like A Bug's Life. I think they had done A Bug's Life before Toy Story. Wow. I mean, as it says here, each CGI frame took from 4 to 13 hours to render. I mean, unbelievable. This film is unbelievable, and it really solidified Pixar's dominance at the animation box office, even to this day. What an amazing piece of work this was. Tim Allen, Tom Hanks, wow. Alien. Now, number 42, I would put this way higher on this list. I mean, Alien to me is a near, along with movies like Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just a perfect film. It's a perfect example of filmmaking craft. Peak sci-fi verisimilitude with this movie. Sigourney Weaver got put on the map. I love this film so much. Even though it's about basically a blue-collar bunch of workaday folks just happen to be working in space, they decide to, well, they're compelled to, because of the rules of space maritime, they have to stop on LV-426 and investigate a distress signal. Big mistake. One of my favorite movies of all time. And number 42, okay, you got Psycho, which is, of course, in front of Rear Window and Vertigo. You know why? Because in Hollywood, despite what people tell you, some people, the only Hitchcock movie they've ever seen is, in fact, Psycho. That's the only reason it's higher up. I would not put Psycho above either Rear Window or Vertigo, but there we have it. Still a great movie. There's even a documentary about just the shower scene. It's still a fantastic film. Talk about subverting expectations. This film subverted many, and kudos to it. Fight Club, of course. Is there a film that is looked more fondly upon than Fight Club over the last, I mean, again, same year as The Matrix, 1999. Can you believe it? It's been 21 years since Fight Club came out. Amazing. It's an incredible film. I love this movie, and there's a reason why it's stuck around. And of course, it's inspired a whole generation of, I think, if anything, could this be ground zero of toxic masculinity? I mean, some people would say we've had thousands of years of that, but in the modern day, this film, wow, what a great movie. David Fincher coming off of like Seven. Wow, this film and The Game. He went from the Seven, The Game to this. What a stretch of films. Kubrick's The Shining, 1980. You know, as much as I like The Shining, for me, it's always been lesser Kubrick because it's him just... This is Stanley Kubrick's version of a B movie. I mean, I much prefer Dr. Strangelove or Clockwork Orange or 2001 or Barry Lyndon or Lolita, but I still like this movie. It's still a lot of fun. It's a horror movie that is filmed almost all during in bright light until the very end, and it's pretty spectacular. When Harry Met Sally, again, people say, oh, this is Woody Allen light. I don't think so. Again, along with movies like Amelie, this movie never fails to put a smile on my face. It's another movie I can probably recite back to front. I love this film so much. I mean, men and women can't be friends. They always want to have sex with each other. This film is just a delightful movie. If you haven't seen this movie, I can't believe this movie is also, now it is 31 years old. Hard to believe. Rob Reiner's, I mean, Rob Reiner, what a run he had, from Spinal Tap to The Sure Thing to Stand By Me to this to, of course, Princess Bride, A Few Good Men. I mean, one of the great populist filmmakers of the 80s and 90s. What a phenomenal film this is. One of my favorite movies of all time, Dr. Strangelove, one of Stanley Kubrick's, perhaps one of the funniest movies ever made. If you haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, it's also one of the great movies ever made. There's so much sophisticated humor and also puerile humor in this. You know that when Kubrick was making this movie, he was having the time of his life. Of course, Peter Sellers famously plays 3 different roles in this movie. It's an amazing, amazing film if you haven't seen it. If you haven't, how can you have not seen Dr. Strangelove? Look, another movie that if you have an aversion to black and white movies, watch this movie. My God, the actors alone, unbelievable. Ferris Bueller's Day Off at number 36. I think this movie, as much as I like Ferris Bueller, it shouldn't be on this list. It's a little outclassed. I don't know what to tell you, but, I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, funny enough, as I was drifting off to sleep last night on my YouTube, I was just clicking through YouTube. I was watching my fellow YouTubers, and like on the IMDb, it pops up that there's movies for free. I watched the first hour of War Games. I hadn't seen War Games in years, and I loved War Games. I loved everything about War Games. In 1983, John Badham, who directed Saturday Night Fever and the recently released Dracula, I say recently released on Blu-ray, Dracula, Scream Factory, Shout Factory put out Dracula. He directed both Blue Thunder and he directed War Games in 1983. And I watched War Games, and first of all, I forgot Michael Madsen is in the opening of that movie. Michael Madsen is in he was in Special Bulletin and War Games, both movies that dealt with nuclear war, nuclear apocalypse back in 83. But War Games is really good. Matthew Broderick had a great run. He was doing things like Biloxi Blues, did Ferris Bueller's Day Off, of course, War Games. I mean, he really was the everyman that everybody could identify with. Girls both liked him and admired him, and so did dudes. He was like the perfect everyman guy. Of course, I think Ferris Bueller's Day Off is peak Matthew Broderick. And Mia Sara, who's not in love with her. And, of course, Captain Harriman of the Enterprise B. What's not to love? 35, Clockwork Orange? Come on, man. Where is he, Alex? Clockwork Orange, one of my favorite movies of all time, maybe my second favorite movie of all time, is only 35. No, but, you know, if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange, there's so many themes in Clockwork Orange. But really the one that I think is most important and the thing that has fascinated me this was the first movie I saw. I was 14 when I first saw Clockwork Orange on home video. And it's the first movie I ever watched. I'd heard about it. I'd seen pictures of it in science fiction film books because it was from a dystopian future. And it was the first movie I ever watched all the way through, and then I rewound it immediately and watched it again. I was obsessed with this movie when I was a teenager. I read the book, Anthony Burgess's novel, which has a glossary because all of the NADSAT language that the Droogs speak, this mishmash of English and Russian and other things. I love this film. I've always loved this movie, and I still love this movie, and I can't believe it's only 35. But there you go. Again, along with The Matrix and Fight Club, American Beauty, Sam Mendes directed this, who's going to probably win the Oscar for directing 1917 this year. 21 years ago, he made American Beauty. Everybody says, I read a lot of hate about this movie. I really like this movie. You know, maybe it was really of its time, and there's people that are too cool for school to like this movie, but I like this movie. I think it's still quite a great film. Fargo, the Coen Brothers' Fargo, which is at number 33. What a great film. One of their best movies. Oh, yeah, I think everyone spoke Minnesotan after this movie came out. What a terrific crime thriller, crazy movie. Incredible cast like William H. Macy, Frances McDormand, Joel and Ethan Coen. My God, this movie is so good. And it spawned a great TV series. Noah Hawley's killing it. Looks like season 4 is going to kill it as well. For Fargo at number 33. Empire Strikes Back at 32. My favorite my favorite Star Wars movie by a wide margin. I told you I've seen this movie I saw it 26 times at Seattle's late lamented UA 150 Theater. I love this film. I love everything about it. I dare say it probably is, for me, one of the greatest, if not the greatest fantasy movie ever made, with the possible exception of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So it's such a great film. Love Empire. Princess Bride, another Rob Reiner, beloved Rob Reiner film that he made before he made this after Stand By Me and before When Harry Met Sally. So who doesn't love The Princess Bride? And I came to this movie late in life. It was something that passed me by, but I've come to love it. And, of course, Criterion did put out a great Blu-ray. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman, who directed Amadeus, directed this movie at number 30. If you haven't seen this film, why? It won Best Picture, based on Ken Kesey's book, right? Yeah, Ken Kesey's book. And one of the great... this is the peak... You know, if Jack Nicholson, if he ever passes, because I'm convinced he might live forever, this is the movie I'm sure... There's a lot of other Jack Nicholson performances. I know people say you can't handle the truth, but R.P. McMurphy is, I think, his signature role, and he's amazing. A man who isn't crazy, battling for the sanity of not only himself, but for everybody in a mental asylum. And his battle of wits with Nurse Ratched, Louise Fletcher, is unbelievable. Blade Runner 29. Why wouldn't you love Blade Runner? This is a great time to point out that I, of course, contributed an essay to a book called The Cyberpunk Nexus. exploring the Blade Runner universe. You can get that now on Amazon. You can get a hard copy or soft copy, a softback, or you can get it for your Kindle. Blade Runner is a great movie. Has there ever been a more indelible vision of the future? Blade Runner, one of the most influential, at least visually, films of all time. I'm surprised it's not higher on the list, but this was Hollywood's list from 2014. Blade Runner is 29. 28, The Graduate. Again, one of the great. I guess you'd call it a dramedy. I mean, this movie, some people say it's dated, but I still think its message of a college student, Benjamin, who comes home from college and he's sort of lost. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He's just graduated and his parents' friends are telling him what he should do, and he doesn't really know what he should do, and he's seduced by Anne Bancroft, who is radiant in this movie. I mean, if you get a chance, by the way, everybody knows, if you just are a college graduate and you're seduced by an older woman, you go for it. I mean, it didn't work out so great for Ben, but, I'm sure later in life he was probably happy that this happened to him. Maybe not. But this movie still is great. Again, one of the great movies about youth, about where we are in life. I think it still resonates. While it's a little bit dated, it's also not. And it's beautifully, widescreen photography on this movie is great. Criteria. I have my Graduate Laserdisc still. Love this movie. Hello, Darkness, My Old Friend. And what a great cast. Murray Hamilton, the mayor from Jaws, is in this movie. The Breakfast Club. Of course, The Breakfast Club is so high on this list. I mean, The Breakfast Club is not better than Dr. Strangelove. I understand when this list was compiled in 2014, almost every executive or producer in Hollywood probably, look, I was in high school when I saw this movie the first time. Talk about a movie that's didactic. It's this, but who doesn't love it? I love The Breakfast Club. Criterion did put it out on Blu-ray. This is the quintessential Brat Pack movie. I mean, this defined the Brat Pack. I know some people would say that, well, not really, because that's more St. Elmo's Fire. But when you think about it, I know Rob Lowe, not in this movie. I get it. But, Breakfast Club at number 27. Can't argue with that. Singing in the Rain. I think my favorite musical of all time, Stanley Donen, who also directed my beloved Charade. This film, again, another movie about Hollywood. For those people who don't know or who have never seen Singing in the Rain, this is a movie that's actually about the transition in Hollywood between the silent era and the sound era, which is great. I mean, everything takes place in the shadow of that. And of course, I mean, come on, Debbie Reynolds. If it wasn't Grace Kelly in Rear Window, Debbie Reynolds' character in Singing in the Rain, oh, she's so delightful in this. And Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor as best buds. This film is just delightful. And even if you don't I'll tell you something. My first day when I was at USC, I was taking a class called Cinema 190, which I had to take as sort of an introduction to cinema. I owned this movie on Laserdisc, and I had never watched it. I owned it, never watched it. Kind of like Singing in the Rain now. I had never seen this movie, and my first day at USC in Cinema 190, in Drew Casper's Cinema 190 class, they showed Singing in the Rain, and I was entranced by it. I also saw All About Eve for the first time in that class, which also left, because you're in the beautiful Norris Cinema. I saw this for the very first time in a giant theater, a beautiful print, and it was fantastic. And I had no idea what this movie was really about. I mean, obviously I'd seen Clockwork Orange. I know where the song came from, but I really didn't know what it was about, because you just hear the title Singing in the Rain. Well, what does that mean? I didn't know it was about Hollywood. I wish somebody had told me. I would have watched the Laserdisc I bought. I used to buy movies that I knew I was supposed to own, that I figured, yeah, I'll get around to seeing them at some point. That's how I saw The Godfather. I didn't see The Godfather until 1989. I owned them. I hadn't watched them. I know. Can you believe I just admitted that on YouTube? But they became quickly my favorite movies of all time. Singing in the Rain. Sound of Music, number 25. Sound of Music, a movie I have not seen. I own. See, there I'm talking about Sound of Music. Talking about Singing in the Rain. I own this. Sophie, Elizabeth's daughter, gave A Sound of Music to me for Christmas 2 years ago. I still haven't watched it. I'm going to have to sit down and take a gander. So, yeah, there you go, man. We'll count down 24-0 next. I'm going to go and see what letters. I got letters. I got lots of letters. This is interesting. Another Star Trek letter. Getting a lot of Star Trek letters. And this letter comes from John Hall. Rob, I write to you again, and once again, about the subject of Star Trek. I thought your stream about the fundamental misunderstanding that the people making modern Star Trek have about the franchise was perfect. Thank you, sir. I have been thinking a lot about this nonsense where the Federation is supposed to reflect our current society and what the people making the show perceive as its ills. In discussion with other Trekkies, I sometimes have Star Trek Deep Space Nine thrown in my face as justification for this direction. I think this is a fundamentally flawed understanding of what Star Trek Deep Space Nine tried to do with Star Trek. Me too. You and I, sir, park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. You mentioned the two-parter Homefront and Paradise Lost in a stream as an example of how Trek has handled Starfleet and the Federation losing its way. I have not seen Star Trek Picard, so I cannot comment on how it handles current political issues, but I wish I had seen these episodes prior to September 11th, 2001. The two episodes show a wonderfully tragic tale, that's what I think, that's the key, of an admiral who feared for the future of the Federation and allowed that fear to incentivize trading liberty for security, which is exactly what that episode is about. It's about the cost and price that fear. He wasn't fundamentally a bad guy. War took its toll. Sisko and the DS9 crew were forced to be the counterbalance in an internal conflict over an attempted coup d'etat of the Federation, as Admiral James Layton had covertly transferred in his own loyalists to attempt to control Earth. The Federation president resisted Layton's attempts at trying to increase security at the cost of liberty at every point, and this led to his attempt to remove the president from power. I do not feel that this scenario tarnishes Roddenberry's vision, as the corruption was sourced from one admiral, and there were elements within Starfleet and the Federation who resisted these attempts. I totally agree with you. That fundamentally, what I was trying to say in that rant that I was making is that fundamentally people did resist. And this is like, the Federation did not ask for the founders to sweep in through the wormhole and try and take over the Alpha Quadrant. This was an external threat, and throughout the entirety of Deep Space Nine, what Deep Space Nine was all about is, look, we had our coalition with the Klingons. We were out there doing whatever we could to try and preserve the utopian ideals, even in the face of this incredible onslaught of war. And we managed to do that. And again, I've always said that what Star Trek did was it preserved our utopia at home, while it was the external that brought in the threats that stood as the proxies for what's going on today. And subverting, I understand what Patrick Stewart wants to do. By subverting the Federation, see, to me, that's easier. It's harder when you have to go out and utilize the alien or the society of the weak to stand in for us. If Star Trek Picard tries to tell us that decades later the institutions of the Federation and Starfleet do not resemble the ideals that have been set out for over 50 plus years, I will reject the show just as I have rejected Star Trek Discovery. Thanks for reading, John. Well, John, you and I, what a great letter, first of all. I totally agree with you. I absolutely agree with that reading of Star Trek. And see, that's my problem, that once you undermine the idea that humanity has overcome its problems and has moved out amongst the stars, if you're going to undercut, if you're going to undercut the Federation, or you're going to say the Federation, how does a Federation become more isolationist? What you're doing is you are undercutting the very ethos and essence of what Star Trek is. And by the way, it's easier to do that. It's harder to go out and figure out and create a new society and tell an allegorical tale than it is to. This is my problem with modern science fiction writing. I mean, so much of it is about, it's Star Trek. It's all been subverted, everything, because it's like we can't have. It's not cool anymore to show something that's inherently good. Everything has to be, because we're so jaded and cynical, and we've made so many Instagram posts that we're all disaffected now. But that's not what Star Trek is. And I think you read what everybody says about, well, the Federation and things. No. That's the easy way out. And why would we expect anything less? We've had 10 years of really badly written Star Trek. We've had 10 years of badly written science fiction from Star Trek writers, and there has been nothing that has been unique or provocative or really has had anything to say of value, certainly not the way that the original Star Trek did, or even all the way through. Look at the final season of Enterprise. Even when you're dealing with things like Demons and Terra Prime, when you had a sort of a megalomaniacal supremacist take power. The last episodes, not the very last episode, not These Are the Voyages, but the penultimate two-parter in Enterprise has a lot more to say about today, and how the costs that were involved. Really interesting. It dealt with interbreeding and inbreeding. It was really, or not inbreeding, I should say, a mixed race babies. I mean, there was a lot going on, and subverting the Federation. Not a fan. Boy, a lot of Star Trek writing, but this is an interesting one too. This comes from Bangladesh, and let me see if I can get this. Asheque. Ashqui? Hossein. I just butchered your name. I am sorry. I apologize profusely. Hi, Robert. Greetings from Bangladesh. I'm a big fan of both you and John Campea. I have always appreciated the nuanced way both of you discuss the topics, and most importantly, disagree with each other gracefully and respectfully. John and I disagree a lot, but we always have a good discussion. I really respect John in that way. I mean, I have a lot of respect that we can do that. I am a child of the 80s, and I was introduced to Star Trek by my mother. I was listening to your January 11th show, and I realized that in my mind I was thinking along the same lines regarding Star Trek. I've decided not to watch Star Trek Discovery Season 3, and it pains me that I'm turning my back to Star Trek, any Star Trek. I believe the Star Trek I grew up with was more hopeful and optimistic. It did not shy away from war and conflict, but underlined the redeeming qualities in everyone. Look, even at the end of the Dominion War, you find out that there is a peace made, brokered between the founders and humanity, and the Alpha Quadrant. The basis of Star Trek was always the enduring nature of the human spirit and our curiosity and sense of adventure and thirst for exploration. That was what pulled me into Star Trek. It frustrates me that I'm actually having to contemplate not watching Star Trek Picard either. And please believe me when I say I'm not a toxic fan. I have no problem if the lead characters are men or women of color and of diverse sexual orientations, even though I am from a conservative society and I am a practicing Muslim man. What attracted me to Star Trek in the first place was that it was an ensemble of differences in beliefs, opinions, lifestyles, and practices that celebrated in the shows, while not shying away from asking the tough questions about fanaticism and xenophobia. Where are the stories that taught us lessons in introspection? Do you remember the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode, The Siege of AR-558? Oh, yes, I did. That episode did more to show the horrors of war than 2 seasons of Star Trek Discovery. You're absolutely right. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a rant. I wish you well in your endeavors, and thank you for being the voice of reason in this clamor for more blood and gore in everything. Well, don't get me wrong. I do love my blood and gore, but I know what you mean, and I thank you for it. You don't have to necessarily read this on air if you don't want to, but I would greatly appreciate it if you could kindly drop me a short reply just saying hi. Well, again, Asheque, I want to say Asheque. Asheque? I think it's Asheque. I think your name is Asheque. But if it is Asheque, kudos to you, sir, because what a cool name. And if not, I hold my head in shame for butchering your name, but I'm saying hi to you right now, and I absolutely thought this letter worth sharing, especially because it was a thoughtful letter about my favorite subject, Star Trek, and the fact that you wrote in and saying that you're from Bangladesh and that you identify yourself as a practicing Muslim, and I think it was great to hear from you. You know, because even me, I admit, sometimes we get a lot of propaganda directed our way toward Islam, but it was very nice to hear that you identified yourself as such and that you too love Star Trek, because that's what I've always said. Everybody on this planet, when you really sit down, you have a meal with just about everyone, I think everybody can pretty much get along no matter what. But interesting to write in from Bangladesh. I want to thank you very much for this letter. And by the way, your letter is on the website, and if you want a Sheik's letter, if anybody wants to comment on it, you can. Again, I'm telling you, I get the best letters from people, and I love when I get letters from other parts of the world. So, Ashik, I hope I didn't butcher your name too much. What can I do? Dean Mikitich, our old friend Dean, is here. He wrote another letter. Dean says, Hi, Rob and the Post Geek Singularity. With Star Trek Picard only days away from airing, I thought I'll ask you a hypothetical question. If Les Moonves had never brought down the knife that ripped out the heart of Star Trek in 2005, and Star Trek Enterprise was allowed to continue for a full 7 seasons without any interference from management, would Star Trek Enterprise have continued with the improvements of Season 4 and bring back fans and new audiences? If Sumner Redstone never broke up the Viacom group so that he could make more profit by selling shares in his 2 new companies, CBS and Viacom, the rights for Star Trek would never have been split into 2. J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot would never have come close to touching Star Trek. Alex Kurtzman never would have been put in charge of the Star Trek franchise by Moonves. So, do you think that Star Trek would have continued after Star Trek Enterprise and wound up with a new series, or would they have taken a break? Would we have gotten another film or more with Star Trek The Next Generation, the cast, and possibly including the cast from Deep Space Nine and Voyager joining in later or having the baton passed to them? Out of everyone working on Trek from 87 to 05, who do you think Rick Berman would have handpicked to be his replacement, or would he have gone for someone outside the Trek family? What state would Star Trek be in today? Personally, I think that Star Trek Enterprise was never canceled, the ratings and the quality of the show had continued to improve past season 4. I'm not sure what we would have seen a new series, if we would have seen a new series straight away, but I would like to think that when or if they did decide to bring Trek back to the small screen, Paramount would have brought back Rick Berman and a team of the past people working on these shows as well as new talent. They would need to do what they did when creating Star Trek The Next Generation. Look at what had been done before and make logical improvements so they made sense to what had come before and also respected canon. One thing for sure, we would have gotten a new show sooner than we would have now with Star Trek Discovery, and let's face it, it would have been a far better show. As for the films, I like to think that the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation would be able to make at least another 2 films before passing on the baton to someone else. As for who Rick Berman would have picked as his replacement, I don't really know who he would have picked outside the Trek family, but from within, I would have liked Ira Behr, Ron Moore, Manny Cotto, or anyone else of the talented people that could take on this sort of workload and responsibility to continue the legacy. I think if Star Trek's history had been like that, it might have been even more popular now than at its height in the late 90s, given the number of popular genre shows and films that there would have been in the last 10 years. What do you and the Post Geek Singularity think? Dean Mikitich. Dean, that is a fascinating letter you have sent in. Here's what I think. I think that the Berman era of Star Trek was winding down no matter what. I think that if, obviously, they had more network interference on Enterprise than they'd ever had before, and I think that would have continued. Les Moonves was not a fan of Star Trek. He certainly wasn't a fan of the fact that basically Rick Berman and everybody making Star Trek for 25 seasons had remained fairly autonomous, well, at least through the end of Voyager, had remained fairly autonomous and did what they wanted. But the problem was they were essentially locked into the same kind of, I know, season 3 was the Xindi arc, and they were really changing it up with Star Trek in the 4th season of Enterprise by telling these mini arc stories. But ultimately, the Berman era of Star Trek remained relatively unchanged since 1987. Star Trek was desperately in need of new blood. I think ultimately Berman would have probably pulled back. If Enterprise could have run 7 seasons, I think absolutely it would have really taken off under Manny Coto's direction. I think we would have gotten into the Romulan War, and I think that would have brought in a lot more people. But they would have really Star Trek was not. I mean, we had serialized storytelling, which was really beginning in earnest in the mid-aughts. We saw a lot of stuff that television was changing. I think the way Star Trek was telling stories was a little stodgy. I mean, not until Star Trek Discovery did we see long serialized stories. Unfortunately, the stories that were told on Discovery was nothing new. Klingons, the Mirror Universe, and then the stuff they gave us that were new, the Spore Drive, nonsensical, again, gobbledygook. And that the cast of, I know some people like Lorca or whatever, but you're not necessarily instilled with a lot of hope and joy through Discovery. It's a very dour, downbeat show. I mean, you've got rape, torture, murder, cannibalism. It's not like Star Trek Discovery. Why I know why people like it. To me, it never felt like Star Trek at all. It certainly doesn't feel like a prequel to the original series. I mean, it really is strange. I thought all of the choices that the producers made, this weird idea that, anyway, I don't want to, you know what? Let me curtail my Discovery talk. I'm hoping Picard is good. I really am. And I do know that apparently at the end of the 3rd episode of Picard, it's been reported that there's a pretty big Voyager cameo coming up, in addition to 7 of 9. But, I mean, that was to be expected. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cameos. We're going to get a lot of fan service throughout the run of that. But I think Star Trek needed to change. It needed to change. And I think the Berman regime, the Berman era of Star Trek, needed to transition. I unfortunately would have rather have seen someone else other than the people that we got now take it over, because I think I am so tired of hearing all of the lip service that is paid about Star Trek. I listen to these producers. It doesn't matter whether it's Heather Caden. It doesn't matter whether it's Akiva Goldsman. It doesn't matter whether it's Alex Kurtzman. I'm like, I understand it's a job. You're making a lot of money. You took the job. But I am tired of listening to them give us plot points or give us talking points we've heard for decades from people. It's just like, give me a break. I would rather hear one of these producers talk about the role of science fiction literature and how it's been a reflection of our times. I have not heard anyone say anything new or unique recently about what Star Trek is. I've been hearing the same things I've heard from people for the last 50 years, and it's frustrating. It would have been nice if somebody who was a true visionary, who was a fan of science fiction literature, who understood heady concepts that are presented in modern science fiction, whether you're reading somebody like Peter Watts or Charles Stross or Stephen Baxter or any of the Peter Hamilton, whoever you read, Ted Chiang. I mean, you never hear that. I mean, anyway, a good letter. I liked hearing from you. Thank you for writing in. Let's check and see where we're at over here. Mark C. sent in another super chat. Good food in Los Angeles? No. Maybe someday you can come to southern Louisiana and I can show you what actual good food tastes like. Well, Mark, okay, buddy, I love Louisiana. New Orleans is one of my favorite cities ever. I've had more fun. I've been in New Orleans 3 times in my life, and you know what? New Orleans is not a place I would mind spending the rest of my days. I love the food. I love the people. I love the music, the ladies. There's nothing, the jazz, there's nothing. If you people have never been to Louisiana and you've never specifically been to New Orleans, my God, what a place. I'm a big fan, and you're absolutely right. The food is to die for. But that doesn't mean that Los Angeles doesn't have good food. There's a lot of great gourmet restaurants, a lot of really good eats, a lot of great steakhouses. Really, there's some great food here. But what's interesting to me is the food. What makes things better in Louisiana is everything is part of a lifestyle that has existed for a long period of time. When a new restaurant opens in Los Angeles, it feels like it's being built on top of the desert, and that one day the desert will roll in and sweep it away after a year or two. Whereas in Louisiana, as in New Orleans, you can go eat food that's literally part of it's the DNA of the history of the city. I mean, it's amazing. And I totally agree with you. 100%. Look, and I everybody should go to Louisiana. Everybody should go to New Orleans. And I know Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is kind of I like Mardi Gras. I was younger, outside of college, and woo, was that fun? Let me tell you. But if you're gonna go to Louisiana as a more seasoned adult, you got to go for Jazz Fest. That's when you go to Louisiana. Go for Jazz Fest. Go for a week. And I guarantee you'll have the best time you ever had. Mark C. also sent in another super chat. You're very generous, Mark. Thank you very much. I got my girlfriend a great Christmas gift this past year. She opened it unenthusiastically. It's a copy of Princess Bride. I told her to open it. On the inside, it said, "To Lisa, as you wish, Carrie Elways." Wow, what a cool thing. I actually met Carrie Elways once. I interviewed him back when the movie Lady Jane he was in with a young Helena Bonham Carter came out in the 80s. He was a very, very nice guy. I've never heard a bad thing or a bad word spoken about him. And I guess as evidenced by that, how cool is it? Now, I hope you did get the Criterion Blu-ray, unless that was obviously very recent, so maybe not. But what a great boyfriend you are. Nicely done, son. Echo Base Network sent in a super chat and said, "Thanks for joining our live stream last night. The lineup was really epic. Wish Doomcock and Gary could have stayed longer." For those of you who don't know, the Echo Base Network put out a documentary that they use clips of this show in, along with everybody else. I got to meet the amazing Lucas, who I've watched on YouTube a lot. Oh my goodness. I mean, a lot of people, he's a controversial figure. But again, I really had a good time talking with everybody, and I want to once again shout out to the Echo Base Network. Kudos to you guys for setting out and deciding to make something, and you actually went out and made it. And I haven't quite got around to watching it all, but everybody should head over to their channel and watch it. I know it's you have a lot of YouTubers appearing in it, offering their thoughts as to the sequel trilogy, which probably is going to leave us banned for life from Disney, but that's okay. I just respect anybody that sets out and actually makes something, because it's hard to make. So absolutely. So thank you for involving me. It was a lot of fun being on your live stream, and I give it up for you guys for making that documentary. And now we're back to this. We are down to, of course, oh wait, why don't we go back to our list here? Back to this. We are at number 25 with Sound of Music. And where are we going to go now? 24 is Jaws. You know, I would put that higher, but who doesn't love Jaws? I mean, obviously, Steven Spielberg, after making the Sugarland Express and, of course, working on TV projects for Universal, like the Night Gallery movie, he just cemented himself into Hollywood history with Jaws, a movie that was, by the way, nominated for Best Picture, but Steven Spielberg was not nominated for Best Director. So it's not like Greta Gerwig's not included being included amongst the best directors this year is anything unique. Spielberg did not get a Best Director nod for Jaws, which is unbelievable. Lawrence of Arabia at 23, one of the great epic movies, if not the great epic movie of all time, only at number 23. Huh. If you haven't seen this movie, shame on you. Why haven't you seen it? Silence of the Lambs, number 22, a movie that I like but I don't love. It's got two unbelievable performances. Obviously, Jonathan Demme directed it. I was actually let down by this movie a little bit. I love it. I love watching it, but I don't think it's as good as it could have been. Not to take away from the film, but of course it did win Best Picture, And it was a horror film that really won. The first time really a horror movie. Exorcist didn't win Best Picture. This won Best Picture. But I really maintain it's because of two A-listers giving A-list number one performances of their careers. And, I love the book so much. And it's still good. And any movie that gives Scott Glenn a role is okay in my book. But obviously, number 22, I would have put it lower. Chinatown. Roman Polanski's Chinatown, 1974, same year as The Godfather Part 2. Both nominated for Best Pictures of their respective years there. One of my favorite, you can't call it modern anymore because, it's, 45 years old. But I think of it as modern as opposed to noir. I mean, one of the great detective stories ever told. It's so great. And the ending, my God, does this movie stick the landing. One of the great scores of all time. It's so great. And what a movie about how life really is. Yeesh. Love Chinatown. Of course, number 20, It's a Wonderful Life, the best Christmas movie ever made, and a great fantasy film. Lest we forget, there are angels in this movie, and there's alternate universes. And I love this film. I think it's a great movie, great performances, and it shows kids today, if you don't want to watch black and white movies, you're wrong. You go back and you watch this movie. This movie is wildly entertaining. It's so much fun to watch. I really love this film. It is really one of the great movies ever made. It really is. Not just for Christmas, but anytime. Goodfellas, obviously, everyone loves this movie. I remember, I've told this story before, I was working at Warner Brothers when this movie came out, and the first time I saw it was at an employee screening. It was Monday night screenings, Screening Room 5, and or Screening Room 20. I think this was in the big screening room, and this was what a great movie. I don't think I could wax rhapsodic about this all the time, but I won't. I mean, what more needs to be said? It's so good. Everything about it's so good. Also, another movie that the editing. I'm inspired by it. Thelma Schoonmaker always shows you that you don't necessarily need to have perfect continuity. Nobody cares. And never more so than Goodfellas, but still so well edited. Annie Hall, the movie that defeated Star Wars at the 1978 Academy Awards for Best Picture, which I'm still upset about. I love Annie Hall. I'm a huge Woody Allen fan. By the way, I will always be a Woody Allen fan, and I don't believe there's a lot of evidence the man was exonerated by 2 state investigations back in the day. But Annie Hall was such a great movie. I love this movie so much, and it's a romance. It's a look at New York. I just love this and Manhattan and Stardust Memories. Woo, could watch them forever. So good. Apocalypse Now, one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the greatest movies ever made in terms of peak verisimilitude in the service of telling a crazy, phantasmagorical anti-war story. I mean, it's an adaptation of Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and this movie never stops getting amazing. It's I got it right over there. It was finally released on 4K this year, an amazing transfer, all 3 versions, both a theatrical, Apocalypse Now Redux, and of course, Final Cut. What more needs to be said? If you've never seen this movie, go watch it on the biggest screen with the biggest sound system you can. It is amazing, and it deserves to be higher. I'd put it in the top 10, but okay, it's up there. It's Kill a Mockingbird, based on one of the great books ever written. My God, is this movie ever great. I mean, people forget Robert Duvall's in this movie. Gregory Peck giving the performance of a lifetime. One of the great legal thrillers. I'm a huge sucker for legal thrillers. I love legal thrillers. Do you like legal thrillers, Gilbert? He doesn't understand why I am still talking. But we're almost done, Gilly. It's a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. Oh, no, I got everybody here. They don't like it. I know. Okay, I get it. All right, look at this. Boy, you're an eager beaver today. No. Wow, that's rude. Look at this. I'm being accosted by doodles. It's doodle mania all up in this hizzle. Come on, you guys. You. I know. We'll take you to the place that you like to go. I'll be done soon. Anyway, To Kill a Mockingbird. Gone with the Wind. A movie, again, fallen out of favor, probably not politically correct. Truly one of the epic movies ever made. Based on Margaret Mitchell's novel about the antebellum South during the Civil War. Say what you want about this film. This is what movies were all about. It's crazy. The scope of this film is insane. And again, it's really about people. And at its core, it's about the push-pull relationship between Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. I mean, it's a timeless tale. I know it might not be as politically correct now, but it is one of the most successful movies of all time, and it's certainly something to behold. I recommend it at number 15. Number 14, Life is Like a Box of Chocolates. Who doesn't like this movie? I guess a lot of people don't, but it's still a great movie. How can you not love this movie? The Odyssey through American history, and of course, Tom Hanks at the center of the film. What's not to love? Raiders of the Lost Ark at number 13. You know, again, I love this movie. Like Alien, like Jaws, I say it's a perfect movie. It really is a perfect movie. I know someone's going to be like, well, you know, when Indiana Jones was on the periscope of the U-boat, what if it ever went underwater? How would he survive? Like, it never went underwater. That's not a flaw. It just didn't. But the fact that he's not very proactive at the end of the movie, he at the end of the movie he's tied to a post. Yeah, well, he knows enough to close his eyes, and the Nazis are dead. I don't care. This movie's a perfect movie. I love it. Who doesn't love this movie? Everything about it's great. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Philip Kaufman teaming up, coming up with this original story. John Williams, one of his most rousing scores. Who doesn't love this movie? Karen Allen. Oh, it's great. Number 13. I don't know if it's necessarily better than the classic movies that we've had, but it is still one of the most fun times at the movies. And it makes sense that popcorn entertainment is at the top of this list as opposed to highfalutin movies that have a lot on their minds. Because Back to the Future is another movie that I would say has a perfect screenplay. One of the most clever screenplays. And I'm not saying it's got the screenplay that All About Eve or Sunset Boulevard do, but it does have structurally, storytelling-wise, a perfect script. What a fantastic film. Love it so very much. I mean, how many times do I have to say that? Star Wars, number 11. I mean, changed Hollywood history. There's nothing more that needs to be said about Star Wars, but only number 11. Not even the top 10. Let's go down. Top 10 now. What are they? Number 10, Schindler's List. You know what? I love Schindler's List. I think the opening scene where Oskar Schindler is ingratiating himself to the Nazi high command using money and he's subtly bribing them. He basically bribes his way into the Nazi. He needs to curry favor with the Nazis in order to make money. Is one of the greatest things Steven Spielberg ever directed. Liam Neeson as Oskar Schindler is amazing. This movie's amazing. And as a Jew who actually met a number of Holocaust survivors every year in my Sunday school, it does pack a powerful wallop. But I do think that this movie, it is a wonderfully made film, and it is a great story, and it is a timeless story, and boy, do I love this movie. I do love it. 2001: Space Odyssey, my man Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director. I know a lot of people don't love this movie as much now, but it really was transcendent as far as science fiction film history goes. No one had ever seen anything like it. And, you know, this idea that humanity, like Star Trek, we do have a future. We do have a future, and this movie is full of awe and wonder for me. It's talk about verisimilitude in terms of its depiction of space travel. It's all right here. I know there's a lot of people, look, the movie's over 50 years old now, and there's a lot of people who are like, oh, yawn, what a bore. You're boring. You're boring. Anyway, number 9, 2001. Number 8, Extraterrestrial, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Again, I think Spielberg, another perfect film. You know, a movie that deals with what's it like for a family when the father has left, what is about the plight of a single mother and a lonely boy dealing with those issues. And perhaps he was the best person, this young boy was the best person to be an ambassador for all of humanity when E.T. is left behind by his compatriots from the Green Planet. And who doesn't love this movie? I remember when I saw this movie, it came out in the summer of '82, the greatest summer of genre films. I went and saw a public sneak before it opened. Nobody knew what this movie was about. It was the ad campaign. Everything was kept really under wraps until almost the day it came out. Nobody knew much about this at all. And when it came out, I went because Spielberg, it was the movie he made after Raiders, which had come out the year before. And this came out on the heels in the summer of '82. It came out weeks after, days after Star Trek II and Poltergeist. And this was I truly was one of the most magical times I ever spent in a movie theater. I knew nothing about this movie. They kept it under wraps, and it was, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Amazing. Number 7, Godfather Part 2 at number 7. Wow. Obviously, Coppola's sequel to The Godfather. Some people would say it's a much better, I don't think it's better than Godfather, but it's interesting structure going back and forth between young Vito Corleone's rise to power on the streets of New York and Michael Corleone trying to hold on to that power in the modern day, the juxtaposition of the father and the son. Freaking phenomenal. I mean, Godfather 1 and 2 to me, they're my 2 favorite movies of all time. And I never get tired of watching them. And as Coppola said, it's the story of a king and his 3 sons. And he was correct. Casablanca. Casablanca last summer, we went and saw this at the Western Museum here in LA. They set up a giant screen, and they would screen movies outdoors, and we saw that on the big screen. This film truly is one of the great movies ever made. It never loses any of its power. And if you're not going to watch black and white movies, if you watch one, this is the one. Again, one of the great screenplays of all time. Michael Curtiz knocked this out of the park. You know what's really interesting about this movie was it was just done as a studio. These guys were they were under contract and they'd crank these things out. And sometimes you got this. I mean, this is one of the great, it's so nuanced. It's about so many different things, but ultimately it's about sometimes you have to let the woman you love go because it's better for her that you do. It's better for the planet. It's better for the world, even though it's tough. This film it's just, what can I say? Number 6, though, I think it'd even be higher. Pulp Fiction. By the way, Pulp Fiction is not better than Casablanca. Just saying. But I understand why. Because this is a favorite amongst people that live in Hollywood. You know what? There's more people that were working in Hollywood that have seen Pulp Fiction than have seen Casablanca. That's why Casablanca is not as high up as Pulp Fiction. Just saying. It's true. You heard it here. Who doesn't love this? Number 4, Shawshank Redemption. My love for this movie is boundless. I was blown away by how good it turned out. Frank Darabont's feature directorial debut. He'd made another Stephen King adaptation, The Woman in the Room, first. But man, The Shawshank Redemption, firing on all cylinders. Roger Deakins, who's going to win another Academy Award this year for 1917, shot this film. My God, is everything about this movie is perfect. Everything about this movie is just the actors, the direction, the writing, the cinematography, the storytelling, the fact that it's based on Stephen King's Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. This is by far the best Stephen King adaptation. There's nothing about this movie that I don't love. The only thing I hate is the credits because that means it's over. It belongs at number 4. I'll give you that. Citizen Kane, obligatory. Everyone says it's the best movie of all time. It is wildly entertaining. A lot of people have never seen this movie before. If you've never seen this movie, I implore you to watch it because, again, it is a movie that is far more entertaining than you might think. It jumps around through time. It has amazing performances. The actors in this film are unbelievable. It's just a great... I know, buddy. Do you like Citizen Kane too? It's incredible. Citizen Kane's incredible. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Number 2, The Wizard of Oz. Come on. I grew up watching The Wizard of Oz on network TV every year. I love The Wizard of Oz. One of the great fantasy films of all time. Probably the first epic fantasy film ever made. I mean, I know Metropolis and all that, but a populist fantasy. This wasn't even the first adaptation of Mr. Baum's Oz books, but it is amazing. It's still amazing. They recently released a Blu-ray, a 4K. Would you like Wizard of Oz? Tallulah barks just like Toto. This is actually a recreation. This is Tallulah doing Toto. Yeah, I understand. I know. You're bored. Don't you want to know who number 1 is, Tallulah? Don't you? I'm giving her another cookie. She's cookied out. Maybe these organic cookies. I mean, oh, you're going to come up again. Look at this overzealous dog. Here you go. Yeah, now I have to give one to Gilbert. Yeah, okay. You got to calm down. Anyway, you're harshing my number 1 reveal. Okay, wait. You're also going to pull out... Okay, now get out. You have to go. Thank you. Oh, see what you did? These dogs. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think number one is? Dun, dun, dun. Number one from the 2014 list of Hollywood's favorite movies. She can't believe it. Number one is, of course it is. It's The Godfather, ladies and gentlemen. Look, I know. You want to come up here? Okay, you can come up here and I'll put you on camera and they can see what a holy terror you are. So there you go, Tallulah. That was, and you're barking. Number one, The Godfather, ladies and gentlemen. That was a list of the 100 favorite movies of Hollywood, the people that worked and are in the business in 2014. And with that, I'm going to bring this long episode of Robservations episode. Oh, hang on. Let me see if anybody said anything that I missed. I don't think so. I think I got everybody. That brings an end to Robservations episode number 323. I want to thank all of you for being here. This was pretty fun. I thought this was going to be kind of a throwaway episode. I really liked talking about this. I'm really glad you all were here. Thank you all for the continued support. I have a lot more letters to read, so I will be endeavoring to get through as many of these letters as I can. I will be doing shows at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm going to try and do shows from New York next weekend. And if you are interested, if you're around next Sunday in New York City and anybody contacts me, I've got some seats to see Tango Shalom, the movie that I produced, edited, and post-supervised, and you'll be able to see it. Hey, guys, they're doing terrible things. They destroyed 4 books yesterday. Very, very, very upsetting. But anyway, I want to thank you. I also want to thank my moderating staff, the Venerable, Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa. I want to thank Detective Jim Boyers. Watch out, he's a cop. He knows if you've been bad or good. I want to thank, of course, the former birthday boy, Gregory Smith, who is he's still constructing his 1-to-1 scale snow speeder from The Empire Strikes Back, which will make its appearance at the Emerald City Comic Con. And, of course, we have Louis Yu, who's talking about driving across America, ladies and gentlemen, hitting all the hot spots. He wants to do that. And then, of course, Jordy Lyons, our latest moderator. I want to thank them for all the great work that they do. They make this, the Post Geek Singularity community, a great place to hang out. But most of all, I want to thank you imagination connoisseurs, you people that support this channel. You keep me going. You keep me honest. And I want to thank all the new subscribers and everybody here. If you can, please hit like if you like these channels, because I found out I don't do myself any favors with these live chats for my YouTube analytics. So the more people hit like and the more people that hit subscribe, it's better for me. It's better for you. Or as Kirk said in Star Trek 4, it's better for them. It's better for, and I want to thank you for that. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, Robservations, the show about something, episode number 323 comes to an end. I'm once again your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and it has been a pleasure to spend a Saturday and Sunday weekends afternoons with you guys and girls and gentle beings and everybody here. And thank you very much. And by the way, if you want to send me letters, the burnettwork.net website. Go there, participate. Every letter I read, you can find them there. You can comment to other letter writers, and it's just great. Thank you once again.